grant for $25,003. I've had some discussion with a couple of the department heads that may be interested in that money. Not exactly sure what it's to be used for at this point, but it'll be used in a similar fashion. We've also understood in the governor's budget that he's proposing that we would be seeing a decrease in our shared revenue next year by about $28,000. We've been seeing decreases in our shared revenue over the last few years, so this is not necessarily a big surprise. Clearly, we would rather not see it go down, but circumstances, this may not be as bad as it could have been. The Finance Committee has approved the schedule for working on the 2010 budget. Yes, we're already looking ahead to that. Your department heads and committees will get notified as things go on about where we're at in the process and what we need. Generally, it really gets rolling when the software gets opened up for budget data input. What we'll probably be more interested in from the board as spring comes and turns into summer is where you want to see next year's budget heading. And of course, how things sort out at the state and federal level will have a lot to do with what we're going to be able to do for our budget for next year. The Administration Committee met last week, or I guess a week and a half ago now, and discussed, as is their responsibility, time and date for a county board goal setting session. Friday, April 24th was chosen. Starting at 9 o'clock, we'll meet or at 8:30 I mean, we'll meet in the community room downstairs, the Ole Anderson room. The agenda is not finalized yet, but it appears it will consist of following up on the goals that were set by the board last April, plus some discussion on committee structure, committee organization under a 19-member board. The Administration Committee has had some good discussion on that. Would like to have you all involved in your choice of options for the future. I've put together something that you can certainly work from. Certainly by no means the only option, but certainly something that would kick off the discussion for you as this goes on over the summer and into the fall. Probably one of the choices is going to be whether or not the board wants to do something prior to a new board coming in or not. I'm hoping that you'll at least get to a point where you can consider that question. I think it would be easier for a new board to start with a structure that they can change rather than try to accommodate the structure that we have. But that'll be your decision. A couple other things to note on the agenda. We have the NACO prescription discount card program. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. I think we got out as much information, frankly, as we really have. I know that 27 other counties have already started that in the state of Wisconsin. It's a program through the National Association of Counties using their collective purchasing abilities, and it benefits the residents of the county. It's not for employee health insurance or anything like that, but for those who either cannot get in health insurance coverage for prescription drugs or are underinsured. That discount card can be used at just about any pharmacy that exists. We have the resolution on the accountant position. I had drafted that resolution trying to take into account some of the decisions that have been made, some of the events that have happened over the last couple of months. We have had two retirements in the Administration Committee suite between two different departments, and what's proposed is a modification of the positions that exist, a new position of accountant to assist the finance director more, and a reduction in hours in the secretary position that was brand new, but we've already had 3 people go through that position. The idea was to make it cost neutral not only for the rest of this year, which was actually going to be relatively easy, but also in the future, so that we don't see an increase in next year's budget due to new personnel costs. Last week, bids came in for the roof, the re-roofing of this building, the building facing, and the HVAC project. Those are still under review, and we don't have anything for the board here today on that to notify you. We can notify you that when those projects, those bids have been approved. We found out late last week that the LAW union has rejected the contract that the county board approved. Haven't had any communication since that initial acknowledgement, but we'll determine what needs to be done because of that. The final item on the agenda today is a video that, those of you who choose to stay and watch it, was shown at the February Wisconsin Counties Association Legislative Exchange down in Madison. I was the only one there. I thought it was a very interesting video. I showed it to department heads at their February meeting, and we can cue it up here at the end of the meeting for you to watch. It's on the federal debt. It's not a very positive thing, but it might be something that, considering what's been going on, you may want to be aware of particulars. I mean, I'm not going to stand up here and try to explain the federal debt to you, but it does an interesting job of doing that. And finally, I'd just like to extend our condolences to Tim Bramberg and his family on the passing of his father, Eldon. His father worked for the county for several years, and I know many of you probably knew him well, so just wanted to extend that as well. Anybody have any questions? John.
Anything on the walls of our building here?
The walls of the building, that was one of the bid items that we received bids on last week, and we take some time to review the bids, make sure that they're okay and they meet what we asked for and within a budget that we asked for. So we should know where that is, I'm guessing, within a week. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
This one has the this is the per diem report, just so you know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Chuck. The next thing on the agenda would be the review of the agenda. If there are no questions about the agenda today, we'll just decide that it's the approved agenda. The consent agenda, is there any discussion on the consent agenda? The only thing I want to point out is to look at number 2. You'll notice that we've put in April 24th as a goal review day, our goals from this past year and what we're going to do for next year. And that will be held in the community room downstairs. And we'd like to have all members present for that meeting if we could. Elfie? Okay, is there a second? John's got a second. John Mortensen, yeah. There was a motion made by Elfie to accept the consent agenda, seconded by John Mortensen. All those in favor answer saying yes. Yes. And those opposed say no. Okay. The next thing on the meeting, or on the agenda, are appointments, and you'll notice that the Local Emergency Planning Commission, Ed Thurman is there now, and he will be there again next year. We're reappointing him. And Public Health Representative for St. Croix County Veterans, or the St. Croix County Veterans Commission will be Lyle Callagher, John Helgeson, and Don Lind. And those three have been on, and they are going back on. At this time, I would like to ask Cole Tobin and his coach from the high school wrestling team to come forward and be acknowledged. As many of you know, or maybe all of you know, that this skinny kid here won the Yeah, Art, you want to come forward? Okay. Just, yeah.
I want to be honest, I wore this tie because I didn't want him to outdress me today.
And Chris Hansen is his coach. If you have something that you'd like to say, Mr. Hansen, that's fine.
I'd just like to say that this brings to the end of an absolutely fantastic career for Cole Tobin. You know, for 4 years he has done everything possible in the realm of high school wrestling, and he holds has broke and holds basically every important record that we have at Hudson High School, and culminated that into a state championship for himself. So. You know, there's two ways to be a state champion. One is just be blessed with the most gifted athletic talent out there, and the other way is to set a goal and work very diligent at it for a long time. And that second one is what Cole did. An extremely dedicated, hard worker who had a long range plan, and it worked at the end of February here, and his dream of being a state champion was realized. So, you know, I've coached a lot of kids, and this is as fine as they get. So I just like to say congratulations, Cole Tobin.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Tobin. The next thing on the agenda then will be the public hearing. And again, if you're going to speak, you need to have approval of your supervisor and fill out one of these forms. The first one I'll call on, and remember we're holding it at 3 minutes, is Tom Catholic.
Thank you, Mr. Rebels, but I would like to let you all know I did fill out 2 slips. So, does that count?
I'll check them over.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here for 3 minutes. I just wanted to go back and do a little history of how this all came about. It's about 2.5 years ago, and this body here asked the administration committee, which I was chairman of at that time, to review the possibility of reducing the size of the county board. So the administration committee took under advisement many different issues, including how are we going to structure committees and so forth, and then tried to come up with a number that might be workable. Ellen Denzer was involved in those meetings, and also Dick King was on the administration committee, and so was Darrell Standifer at that time. What we did was after we had to find out a number before we could see if the committees fit, and so I think that the numbers we chose were to look at was 25, 21, and 15. And what happened, 21 happened to be the number that fit best for the reorganization of the committees. So what we asked Ellen to do was to come in, and she brought her little black box and put a couple numbers in and hit a button, and up on the screen came districts for 21 representatives. My main purpose for being here today is to just ask you, or to request of you, that when these districts are reformed to 19 districts, that you let the computer do it. This is not about us, it's about representing the right amount of people, so we don't need to be monkeying around with the lines. I would just ask that you let the computer draw the lines so the lines are there, so we have equalized representation in the 19 new districts that will occur after the next election. With that, how did I do? You did fine. All right, thank you.
Next person on the agenda is Kim Dupre.
Good morning. I'm sure Ellen has probably, I just feel sorry for Ellen because no matter what she does, it's probably going to make somebody unhappy. So I have a lot of empathy for her. And so what I'm saying today is not meant anything personal to Ellen at all. And I appreciate all of her hard work on this because I'm sure it has been a real struggle to get this done right. This is the map I had. That was the latest one from the internet a couple weeks ago. I don't know if there was something else that was out there, but I'm from Emerald, so I'm way out in the boonies, and I know I'm way out in the boonies because the school districts are like, I'm New Richmond, the person just south of me is Baldwin, the person just east of me is Glenwood City, so I'm kind of in no man's land out there. You know, I drive 6 miles to get a gallon of milk, but I live a mile and a half from Emerald Dairy, so go figure. But what I did notice was Emerald was cut in half on County Road D, the actual town of Emerald was just cut in half. And so I thought, that seemed, for such a small town, that seemed a little different to me. I wasn't sure the line of logic with that. But and then I noticed this District 2 is where I live, and it's very long. And it's like 15 miles from my house to New Richmond, and this is longer than that. And I thought, boy, that's a big area of square miles for one person to cover. You know, Dan here, my representative, lives about 1 mile south of me. And if he would have to campaign clear over to southwest side of New Richmond, that's a pretty long stretch to go. And so that was one of my concerns, is that's going to be a big commitment out of whoever runs for that district, whether Dan runs again or somebody else. That's a lot of territory to cover. And so that was something I just thought needed pointing out. And I know it's nice to have my representative at some of these town meetings, you know, and we've had some water quality issues out in the Emerald area with a lot of sinkholes and stuff. And it's really comforting to see my county board member at these meetings, so I know he's got his thumb on the pulse of that right now. So that's just, if you have somebody that's more in your community, it makes you feel like you're being represented and somebody's paying attention. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate his attendance at those meetings. And so I think it is unfortunate that a lot of these districts, the county board supervisors, are going to have to run against each other. So that's, but yet when you downsize that much by a third, I don't know how you're going to get around that. That's just, as long as each, I mean, I agree with Tom that we need to let the computer do as much of this as possible so that nobody feels picked on. But I also feel that the rural part of the county, the eastern part of the county, which is where I come from, and I'm a rural farm girl from a pig farm in Iowa, so I empathize with a lot of these people. I mean, I don't want to see us feel like we're shut out on that side of the county. And so if, I know the county planners used to do it in like 3 sections, anything west of 65 was kind of more urban, anything between 65 and 63 was kind of more semi-rural, and anything east of 63, where I am, is straight rural. And so, I mean, if each segment kind of takes an equal hit, I think that would be pretty fair as well. But I tell you what really made me feel good about this whole redistricting thing was Chuck's proposal that I think he's distributed out to some of you guys about the committee structures, because you get a big segment of county board members on each committee. You have 7 members on each committee. You have several different committees, and that makes me feel better about this whole process, to know that there's not going to be just a 3-person committee with 2 people on it, and then that 2 people rule the world type mentality. So seeing that proposal, if that's adopted, that personally makes me feel a lot better from the eastern part of the country, or the county, that whatever my concerns are will have a fair chance of getting heard on the county board level. So, and I hope, you know, we're going to lose a lot of good people, but, you know, Tom Dorsey, when he didn't get reelected, he was my county board representative, county board chair for a number of years. He served as a citizen member on the Human Services Board, actually chaired it for a while. And I hope that those of you who don't make it will serve in that capacity in some fashion, because we got some good salt of the earth people here, and we would hate to lose your input. Thank you.
At this time, then I'll ask Ellen to come forth if there's any questions by supervisors on the redistricting. she'll be able to answer those.
Closing the public hearing.
And I'm closing the public hearing.
You want to give a presentation?
The shorter one, the one that says March 2009.
Presentation redistricting, PowerPoint.
March 2009, yeah, we'll try that one. Good morning. While Cindy cues this up, I'll just explain what I'm going to do. The last time I was before you was in January, and hopefully all of you remember me. Anyway, in January, we presented you with one version of a county board redistricting plan that the administration committee had said we should present to you. And at the February administration committee meeting, they made three small changes, maybe not so small in different people's opinions, but they made 3 changes to that plan we presented in January. And so what I want to do is just explain those 3 changes or any general changes. And the changes were what was mailed out to you in your this past month. So you do have those changes. They are what was presented at the public hearing. They are what was put on the website with those changes. Again, I just want to take a few minutes at the administration committee's recommendation and explain why those 3 changes were made. Okay? Okay, now they said it was going to work. Maybe if I turn that on. Oh, there we go. Go back one. Okay. Again, these were the goals of the administration committee. Just to summarize quickly, they've reviewed a variety of plans. I think this is actually version 6, and each time what they've done is try to create the lowest possible statistical deviation as required by law, to compact the communities of interest, again required by law, decrease the number of splits in a municipality, and that leads to decreased number of municipalities sharing districts to the greatest extent possible. And of course, it's not possible to get rid of all splits. It's not possible to get rid of all shared districts, but they've decreased them to the greatest extent possible, always keeping in mind those other goals. And they've tried to look at the election impacts and any issues for confusion and costs for clerks and voters. And most of these last few changes are to try to accomplish those items. This is the plan as it was mailed out. There is just to point out, when we put it up on this PowerPoint, it took the little squares around all the road numbers and made them little lines. So that's why it looks kind of goofy, but they are just it just took the squares off the road names and numbers. So the one you had mailed out to you looked much better and should look fine. So this is the plan as was sent out based on the administration committee's recommendation in February. And also they reviewed it in March, but didn't make any additional comments or changes. And this is also what was sent out, the deviations, percentages, and numbers. And what their goal, one of the things they did accomplish with these 3 revisions is we got all the deviations below 7% and got the average and standard deviation a little bit lower, just a tiny bit. All right, the 3 changes for the first one was made in the Somerset Star Prairie area. This was to make it a little more compact. The administration committee had asked me to look at that, which I did. It turned out that the changes were a little better for the school districts in Somerset and Star Prairie, create a little better situation for the running elections when you have to have county board election and school board election at the same time. And because the town of Star Prairie is the only community in the county that's split in terms of assembly district, it also provided a little better fit with that. And it's more similar to the existing district in terms of representation and voter recognition. A little bit more similar considering it's larger. And this is what the one I presented in January looked like. It had the 2 kind of L's to the district number 3. And again, district number 2 covered all of Emerald, all of Erin Prairie, all of Stanton, and then a piece out of the town of Star Prairie and all of the village of Star Prairie. So then the change that the administration committee we'd made was to make District 3 be all of the town of Star Prairie and all of the village of Star Prairie. And that meant that there was a shift in District 2, which I can go back and show you more. where we took these pieces here out of the town of Richmond, put them in District 2, and then we have to have a piece out of the town of Somerset. It doesn't, there's no way to get around that. And then these pieces ended up with District 7. I can just go back and show that on the larger map quickly. Yes, Bill?
No, it says draft plan. Which draft plan is it? Are we talking March or are we talking February?
This is exactly the same as what was mailed out to you in February.
Okay. All right. But
there's no change.
And that's the map you were just talking about. Immediately prior to this map was which?
Okay, in January, I presented you guys with maps, and then in February, the administration committee made three changes to, I shouldn't say three changes, they made changes to 3 areas.
Okay, so you're talking now, the map that you're talking about that was on the screen is exactly the same as the map that we have in our packets, correct?
Yes. Yes.
All right, that's what I wanted to know.
Yes. And as I said, what it did is you can see up here, it made the town of Star Prairie intact and the village of Star Prairie intact in District 3, and it moved some of the pieces that we have to have. It moved the pieces here in District 7 out of Somerset, and it moved the pieces in Richmond into District 2. So that was the changes from the plan I presented in January. Any other questions on that particular change? Okay. Another change was in the New Richmond area, and this there was 2 reasons for this change. One, we wanted to switch 2 wards. Just moving 2 wards, flip-flopping them, actually removed ballot styles. And we talk about ballot styles because that's very expensive. How many ballots do you have to have printed? How many clerks and people do you have to have working to direct people in terms of ballot styles? So we went down to 6 from the previous 8 just by doing that. And that results in less confusion for the clerks and the voters, and it's also, of course, saves a little bit of money. The reasons for that were actually partly a trickle-down effect also from that other change we made in the Star Prairie area, and also this need to switch just 2 wards, and that came up from Cindy's review of the impact. So when I presented it to you in January, it looked like this, with some of those pieces that ended up in that District 2. One of those pieces was with part of the city of New Richmond, okay? Otherwise, city of New Richmond was split this way into 2 districts, District 6 and 5, I think it is, yep. So now, what was presented in your packet and what the administration committee recommended is this piece went with District 2, and by switching 2 wards, we made District 5 and District 6 a little bit different. Comes up and around here with this ward coming down in District 6, and it ends up that all of New Richmond is just within 2 supervisory districts, excuse me. Okay? Any questions on that change? All right. The next area we made a change to was Hudson, the city. Basically, we wanted to get below that 7% deviation, which we had when we presented to you in January. That was the request, just instructions of the administration committee. We tried to make it a little more compact. Again, trying to decrease ballot styles. We were able to go down, with the changes we made, we were able to go down from 9 to 8. Not as great an improvement as we would have liked, but the best we could come up with. And that, of course, results in less confusion and cost for the clerks and voters. So, in January, what I had presented to you was, this is all just in the city of Hudson. Basically, you have a District 13, kind of wrapped around like this. Below, you had a District 14 that wrapped down, kind of an old part of town, and you had a District 15 that was the edge of the city plus a piece of the town Hudson. What it was changed to, again, more compact, is District 13, still south of the freeway, wrapped up but not as far. District 15, instead of being kind of on that edge, ends up having that piece of the town of Hudson and then being part of Old Town Hudson. And District 14 is the edge of Hudson and then goes into the middle. Very much more compact, didn't affect any other pieces in the town of Hudson, and tends to be a little tighter. And also the deviations then went below the 7%. Any questions on this one? Okay? And so basically that was where the administration committee left it. Decided that was the changes we wanted. We put it on the county website. We sent this draft plan out to all of you county board members and to all cities and villages and towns, every municipality, and gave them hopefully time to look at it, share it with their board members, and come back to this public hearing and have any comments they might want to have. So, and the next steps after your comments of what you've heard today, any changes, would be to adopt it at your next meeting, either April or May, and you do need to adopt by ordinance. So we will, administration committee, based on your comments today, will be bringing that back to you. So, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Buzz. Didn't see you there.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for all the hard work that this represents.
No problem.
I just have one comment, and it's in the form of a regret. I understand we're gonna have to redo this again in 2011.
Yes.
And I think it's unfortunate that the time and money has been spent doing this now, when we have to redo it again, a year after it's implemented. And I'm reminded of a situation in St. Paul where, on the street where we lived, they dug up the street one summer to install new gas mains. The very next summer, they dug up the entire street, blacktop and all, again, to reinstall communications cable. And I think that in terms of economies of scale, that was a waste of taxpayer money. And I would say of this, that I regret that we are duplicating the cost of this a second time. Again, I salute you for the hard work and the outcome that you've obtained.
Okay. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, Buzz, I appreciate what you're saying, but unfortunately, we have to have the county board districts done before the election. That is a requirement. So we have to do it in 2009 for the election in 2010. Now in 2011, the new consensus comes out. That's when we go back. We may have to adjust the counties a little bit. I doubt it. It's going to be more the wards and within the cities and the villages. That's why we have to do it.
What I'm saying is that the petitions to put this on the ballot were generated without foresight.
Daryl.
Well, I would have a big rebuttal to that. I think they were generated with a lot of foresight. The only regret I had in the whole process is that the county board did not voluntarily reduce itself and was forced to do so by referendum. If we'd done so voluntarily, it would have been a better process. Irregardless of that, we are where we are, and here's an opportunity to look at how we do our work, and that will be a large part of what we'll look at on the 24th.
Mr. Cole.
One of the things that I see is something that's just going on over in Washington County. Washington County, in their infinite wisdom, at a board meeting here about a month and a half ago, decided that they were going to give themselves raises. There's 5 of them over there, and it costs them roughly, what, $250,000 to $300,000 a year for their wages. And at that same meeting, they decided they were going to eliminate employees. Thank you.
Bill.
I guess I'm not too wild about the current plan for the districts that I represent in Old Town Hudson.
Okay.
But it's only going to last 2 years, and that will be true of, I hope, a lot of these districts. And so with the new process that will be coming up, I can live with it.
And it should be pointed out that when we have to redo it again in 2011, we will have to make some changes because, first of all, the population has shifted, as Julie pointed out, and the wards will have to be adjusted. If a ward goes over 1,000 population, for instance, it has to be split by law. You can't be and also it would have worked out better if they'd been smaller. So we'll be encouraging municipalities that actually create the wards to do a little smaller ones. And also, because the county population has grown, there will be some shifts, some changes. So yes, I do think it'll change. So hopefully not drastically. That's been part of the goal, but there will be some change. There has to be. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
This one is for Cindy to vote. By waiting until next month, will this give the municipalities and townships ample time to do the work they're gonna need?
The work that they need to do is in the voter registration program, I think. Is that what you're referring to? Right, we'll have time through the fall to do that. And with the county having 21 municipalities relying on it for voter registration services, we have the bulk of the work here in the county clerk's office to make adjustments in the system so the voters are attached to the right districts.
Yes, sir.
Do we know a cost of what this, basically, this extra redistricting has cost the county and also the townships to read all of this? Just an estimate?
We were asked that also by Mr. Marzoff, and I don't know. I mean, it's my staff time, Cindy's staff time so far, the paper printing, that kind of thing, the public hearing notice. Cindy's staff will put the bulk of the cost will come afterwards as they recode each voter in the county, and they will do them in blocks or groups by ward to the extent they can, but they've never done this before. I mean, they just barely got done creating the voter system, so changing it is a whole new experience for everybody. So how much time it will take, we don't know. How much that time is what is the cost, and every clerk, her time, his time, in Bill's case, that is the cost. So it's very hard to know. If they end up paying overtime or something like that, then that's an additional cost. Otherwise, we're all, budgeted as staff to be here to do our work, to get things done for you guys. So I really don't think we can put a dollar on it at this time. I'm sorry. I just don't know how to estimate it.
How about hours? Do you have an estimate of how many hours you guys have spent on this? And
so far?
Yeah, so far, and then how many hours will you spend recoding everything? I think that's something interesting to the county board to realize the expense of this.
Once I have a better idea of what we have to do within the system, then maybe I can give that to you. And it's the other municipal clerks that have to do the work as well. So I just don't have a good handle on what we have to do once this is approved, and if we're adjusting individuals, if we're adjusting groups, that would help. I'm not sure. But the districts are larger, which will help.
Yeah. And as far as my time, we started in December, meeting with the administration committee. I've prepared, half a dozen plans. We've made lots of copies. I don't know. I suppose it's been about 30 to 40 hours of time, I would guess. Yeah. I have not kept track of it. If you want me to do that next time around, but yeah, the next time will be completely different because you start with those population blocks. So this has been different. So, sir. Oh, go ahead.
I guess I don't know who to address this question to, so it may be more of a comment. I heard Mr. Kaflish mention that the sort of recommended or the accepted number would be 21 for the board to be reduced to, and I'm wondering why instead of 21 in the referendum it was 19.
I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with the referendum. It was citizen driven. Go ahead, Mr. Rabel.
Thank you. I thank the two people from the public to present their statements. And I was just kind of going off the statement of the first gentleman. He kind of said, let the computer do the division. Is the computer program that smart that it can do it, or? No.
Mr. Kaflish was being very nice when he said, let the computer do it. When you first do it, there's definitely, the computer simplifies it. You can do it very fast, not in minutes. He's, again, being very generous in his comment. But the computer doesn't just generate a result for you. You have to grab those big wards and put them in. Because we're working with wards, there's only so many choices. You have to touch. All the districts have to be contiguous. So if a ward, you're saying, okay, should I I think when we had talked about it, we went into much greater detail in the administration committee meetings, but one of the comments, I forget who made it might have been Mr. Standifer or someone else, said, you're really just playing with numbers, plus, minus, and it adds and subtracts very fast, instantly for you, and you just take, okay, I'm debating, should I put these three together? They touch each other, or should I go with these three on the other side? You can make those choices really quickly. And yes, we did have a version that we came up with greater, lower statistical deviation. But it does say in the statutes that you should try to accomplish these other things, compact communities of interest and those kind of things. So there is not one absolute rule that you follow exclusively, and we are hindered getting with the lowest possible deviation by the fact that we must follow the existing ward boundaries. And when you start from scratch and you can adjust those ward boundaries, which we will do when we do it based on the decennial census, then you adjust them and you come up with plus or minus 1 or 2% deviation. So it's not very hard to do. Go on.
Okay, follow up on that. The reason my question is leading into this is people have come up to me and asked, has there been given consideration for board members not to race against each other?
No, we have not looked at that. And in fact, the administration committee, I did have a couple questions that between the first county board meeting and the second one, and I reported those to the administration committee, and they specifically said those are not a consideration. We're not looking at that. Sure, go ahead, Mr. Mortensen.
I would echo the same questions that Supervisor Horn had, and I would like to have that information, they say by June, all the way down to the townships, what they have to do, go through, and maybe you might be able to get that at that time and pass on to the board.
The cost, you mean?
Yes.
We can certainly ask that question, and I can go back and try to estimate the hours and that
And
kind
I
of
suppose
thing.
that includes the city of Hudson and New Richmond and all the way through.
Well, and as Cindy said, a significant number of the municipalities rely on the county to do that voter registration. It's not really registration, but the voter, what's the term again?
Data entry, voter registration.
The voter registration and data entry into the system, they rely on the county to do it for them. So the bulk of it will be the county clerk department. Mr. Kolb.
Yes, since I'm going to make an assumption that the original referendum was written by lawyers and that they have some sort of an agenda, before I would like to vote on saying yes or no to this, I would like somebody that was originally from this committee to come, or of this group that pushed this agenda forward, to come in and give us a presentation on why they did what they did with the numbers.
And again, I don't know why. I've been asked that question. It's interesting. I've asked that question a lot, just casually. Where'd 19 come from? Where'd 19 come from? I honestly do not know. It was not one of the numbers they originally looked at 2 years ago. It's not a number that I have. If they'd asked me to recommend one based on just how make it easier and better to do redistricting, I would have said a factor of 3, just because 31 is close. It's 30, and factors of 3 would have been easier to work with. 15, 21, like that. That was why it was. That was the only simple reason I had. As far as what works for the county board in terms of committee structure and administration structure, that has not been part of what I've been talked about ever. They've only asked me questions about how to divide up the county in terms of the wards.
That's where I would like that the board recommend, or the board request the people that put this forth to come and give a presentation on why it was, because it was never explained on the ballot. And I don't believe that the community has any clue on what they voted for.
Well, unfortunately, it's binding whether they understood it or not. That's the way it is. Mr. Schrank.
Ellen, the question I have is you got all these little islands in Richmond.
Yes.
Yeah, wouldn't it be easier and less cost effective for the city of New Richmond to combine that all into one large area?
It's not. Those little islands are because those islands have not been annexed. And they aren't true islands, they're peninsulas. Otherwise, they legally would have had to have been annexed. And maybe I'll turn this back on and we'll go back to that slide and just explain it again real quickly. I do have a light, this? Okay. What Mr. Schrank is talking about is like this little spot of green here and this little spot of green here. There's one down here, one little things here and there that look like, and actually the reason you see this big thick black line is there's a spot, if I zoomed in closer, there's a spot of green right here. And what that is that as annexation occurred historically in New Richmond, these areas were not annexed. They were left out, and they could legally be done that because they are a peninsula, not an island. They're connected by a road still to the town of Richmond or the town of Star Prairie or the town of Stanton or the town of Erin Prairie. And so they have to be left with their municipality that they are still attached to. They have to be with their various towns. And we can't say, gee, it'd be nice for elections not to do that. It'd be more. They are, as their owners, their property owners, for whatever reason, chose not to be annexed, not to go along with an annexation that went all around them. And that's their choice, I understand. So I can't fix those things. I have no authority to do that. All right. Any other questions or comments? Any comments for the administration committee as they move forward with this? Okay, we'll see you next month or the month after to finalize it. Do you want to just end it? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
Is Merlin Blaisdell in here?
I should call him. You want him up here?
Yeah.
You want to do a couple resolutions?
Let's do a couple resolutions. Well, then we'll, at that, if Merlin's not here at the moment, we'll go to number 2, the resolution amending St. Croix County Board of Supervisors rules and bylaws. Any miscellaneous corrections? That, I believe, was being offered by the administration committee. Are there any questions on that resolution? It's number 2 in your packet. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under Article 3, it says Section E. I think that's a typo. It should be Section D.
Yeah, before you do that, though, let's have a motion to adopt that resolution in a second. Julie moves it and Esther seconds it. Now we'll discuss whatever discussion you have, Dave.
Yeah, right where it says Article 3, Section E. And it goes down through the vice chair shall. I think that's a typo. It should be Section D.
Dave?
Yes.
It is correct, it's E. The
It is
most,
correct, it is
yeah.
D? Okay.
If I can explain that just a little bit, the handbooks that you have with the rules and bylaws, I don't send out updated pages every time we update it because the books typically don't get updated. And what was added to that to make it E was the county board chair stipend was added to that. So it did shift that down. It is correct that it is E. If you look on the website, the most recent rules and bylaws are there. I'm hopeful to, after, if these passes, to update books in April. So.
Any other questions on that resolution? If not, you've heard a motion and a second to that. All those in favor of adopting this resolution say yes. Yes. Opposed, say no.
Who seconded that?
Esther seconded. Mr. Peterson.
In that we didn't receive anything on this ahead of time, we don't know what we're talking about. Can we be informed of what the corrections are they're considering? We didn't get anything they're all looking for.
They were sent out with a preliminary agenda 2 weeks ago.
I'm gonna move to the next one. We'll then take resolution 3. Will somebody put that on the floor? Esther?
I will move it to the floor.
And Buck seconds it. Resolution to amend rules and bylaws to add a description of the Substance Abuse Committee. And Esther, you want to speak to that?
Originally, our committee was an ad hoc committee called the St. Croix County Methamphetamine Committee, and we were charged with trying to find ways to educate the public to stop the movement of methamphetamine and its use throughout the county. Now we are called the Substance Abuse Committee, and we're still dealing with the meth problem, but we've also added to it other drugs and alcohol as part of our work.
You've heard the motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, Buzz?
Yes, I would just like to make a recommendation. Since its inception several years ago, our county's drug court has seen many successes, and thankfully there have been 4 or 5 graduations from that drug court that I'm aware of. Not only has this program been a successful endeavor, it's also been cost effective. I would therefore like to see our drug court specifically included in the list of tools, which would then read education. This is the paragraph on the resolution under Substance Abuse Committee. The tools would include education, prevention, control, and drug court programs. It appears that that's a mission statement of the Substance Abuse Committee, and unless there is a need for discussion of that recommendation, I make the motion that those words and drug court be inserted in the paragraph cited in the resolution.
There's a motion on the floor. Bill?
I don't, speaking to Buzz Marzoff's suggestion, I don't think that that's necessary because...
We need a second, don't we?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We need a second before we can discuss it.
Did he move an amendment? And if so, I didn't hear a second.
No, we don't have a second on it, and we should have a second before we discuss it. Anybody willing to make the motion to second it?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. All right, Bill.
I don't believe that it's necessary to have this amendment because the way the end of the sentence, second sentence, finishes up, it says county departments and public and private organizations. And certainly the drug court would be a public organization.
I think one of the things that our committee has worked towards is the education of the public. Most of the people that are involved in the drug court have already been arrested for either selling drugs, having drugs in their system, or whatever. Our commitment is to prevent and to educate. That's a whole different ballgame once you're in the drug court. We have supported the drug court. They come to our meetings. We're very, very happy that they do come to our meetings, but I don't think it's necessary that our committee take on that process of the drug court. Those are entirely 2 different issues.
It's a separate
very separate issue.
My suggestion was not to include the drug court in your committee. My suggestion was to reinforce the fact that we do have a drug court so that the sentence would be, this work will be done through education, prevention, control, and drug court programs. It's simply to clarify that we do have a very effective drug court program in operation, and I support that, and I think it's important to make that a part of this mission statement.
I do support the drug court idea, and I will ever be grateful to Judge Black for having initiated it and taken the time and commitment to meet every Wednesday morning at earlier than the regular hours in order to enable the drug court to get going and leading to its success. But that does not mean that mention of the drug court needs to be explicit in this description of the mission of the Substance Abuse Committee. So I support the chair of that committee in saying that this motion to amend ought to be defeated.
Any other discussion? If not, there is a motion on the floor. First, to amend this. All those in favor of amending this motion?
Could we ask for a roll call vote, please?
You're voting on the resolution, you're voting on amending this resolution that's on, that we have on the floor in another motion.
Mr. Chair, or can you repeat the motion that we're voting on, so everyone is clear what they're voting on?
The motion was made to amend the original motion to include education and so forth that this committee does, and we don't feel it needs to be on there, because that's what their mission is to begin with.
Could we have the exact wording?
May I read it the way I would intend it?
Yeah. Let Buzz read it back.
My motion is that the wording beneath the three words Substance Abuse Committee be amended so that it reads, the Substance Abuse Committee is responsible for working to end substance abuse in the county. This work will be done through education, prevention, control, and the drug court programs, utilizing county departments and public and private organizations.
Okay, now, we're going to vote on whether we should amend the original motion by that statement. And we're going to do by roll call vote.
Please.
Gerald Peterson?
Yes.
Charlie Grant?
Yes.
Greg Telejohn?
No.
Roger Larson?
No.
Richard King?
Yes.
Frederick Horn?
No.
John Mortensen?
No.
Esther Wentz?
No.
Jean Ritz?
No.
David Peterson?
No.
David Osnes?
No.
Lauren Sather?
No.
Richard Marzoff?
Yes.
Sharon Norton Bauman?
No.
Peter Post?
No.
Roger Rebholz?
No.
Bill Cranmer?
No.
Daryl Standifer?
No.
John Borup?
No.
Clarence Malick?
No.
Steve Hermson?
No.
Kenneth Colby?
No.
Cindy Leonard?
No.
Linda Lucky?
No.
Shane Demuling?
Yes.
Laura Tomerdal? Dan Rabel?
No.
Alfred Schrank?
Yes.
Julie Spear?
No.
Joel Hurchin?
No.
Bill Peavy?
No.
6 no, 25 yes.
No.
Or I'm sorry, other way around. Okay, other way around. 6 yes, 25 no. Sorry about that.
Okay, the motion is defeated. Now we'll go back to the original motion. That the resolution be accepted as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same. That resolution carries, so that carries. Merlin, do you want to give your presentation at this time? Our veteran service officer will give his report to the county board of supervisors at this time.
Well, I appreciate having the opportunity to be here today. You all received a written report, I think, that I made up last week. The main thing I wanted to reiterate was that our National Guard soldiers are at Fort Bliss, Texas right now. They're in preparation for deployment to Iraq in April. So please keep those troops and their families in your prayers, and let's pray for a safe return. They should be coming back sometime next March. So other than that, I think what's in the report, if you have any questions or anything of me that you would like to ask, I'd be happy to take those. We continue to stay busy, and Our veteran population will continue to rise over this year and next year because of those deployments. And so when those folks come back, they will be veterans. Yes, ma'am.
What have they found to be the connection between military service and Lou Gehrig's disease?
Well, they don't really have a firm connection, except that there's so many more people that have been shown to have had service from, as they diagnosed Lou Gehrig's disease. The majority of the folks that have gotten that, they see a higher trend in veterans than in any other section of the population. So some of the veterans organizations have gone to Congress, have gone to their leadership and requested to have a presumptive condition of this established for veterans. So other than it's just the numbers, it's a numbers game, but more veterans population has acquired ALS than any other sector.
Do they have a suspicion of exposure to certain?
They do not. I'm not aware as a specific reason why, like maybe asbestos or something. I don't know, and they don't either. They're just showing that trend is there. So it is a big benefit for folks, for families especially. I think we've filed probably 8 claims, and 7 of those are for widows whose husbands have died of ALS. And they can all be backdated back to the 23rd of September last year when they can receive disability, or they can receive a dependency compensation for that. So there's a lot around. I think the VA is going to receive a lot of those claims. I have one veteran currently that I just got a letter back today that has been awarded 100% service connection for it. And it's a very debilitating disease. Yes, sir.
We had a friend that she's widowed, and but there was the only reason she was aware of it is she found it in a corner of a magazine. Is there any attempt to reach out to these people that are affected by that?
Yeah, it's in all the veterans, and the veterans magazines are covering it pretty heavily right now. There's an article in the American Legion magazine, and I've also tried to put some information out through our office to get folks made aware of it. And I'll be going to New Richmond first part of next month to talk to the American Legion posts there, as well as the county organization, so that we can get as much of the word out as possible. But word of mouth is a big help in this. And if you know of anybody who has been a veteran who has passed away and the widows are still around, they should be in touch with us. And if it doesn't need to be in St. Croix County, just have them go see their county service officer regardless of where they live. So it's fairly easy to get this this claim made and approved. We just need a diagnosis, and it needs to be a part of the death certificate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, John.
Merlin, can you give more of a breakdown on the makeup of the $6.5 million? Is the most of that medically related? Is it?
That's all compensation and pension, and a lot of that money comes anywhere from a veteran who's 10% up to 100%. 100% veteran today receives around $2,700 a month compensation. 10% is at 125. So any place in between those, and I can't tell you the numbers of disabled veterans that are in the county, but the VA tracks it, and they track it by state, and then the state tracks it also by county. So that's the figure from 2007, because the 2008 figures aren't out yet.
Thank you.
Yes.
Merlin, I understand that if you have a disability from service, 100% disabled, that when you reach a certain age, you don't have to pay property taxes anymore?
If you're 100, yes. Okay, let me.
disabled?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of letters from the VA. Has sent out letters explaining to veterans who are 100% disabled to contact their service office. And starting this year, if a veteran is 100% disabled either through unemployability, which will pay a person a rate of 100% even though they're not totally disabled, they're not able to work, starting this year, starting in June or July, we can start making applications to the state for their property taxes to be paid from 2009. So folks that have paid taxes in 09 will get that money back through the Department of Revenue on their 2010 income tax filing. Now, several veterans don't file income tax because all their money is from disability, but they need to do that in order to get this back, even though it's all non-taxable. So it's kind of like the stimulus package last year. All veterans had to file income tax in order to get it. Lauren.
Just a point of clarity, Esther asked if they don't have to pay taxes. They have to pay their
Yes,
taxes. They just get reimbursed through an application process.
Yeah, they need to pay them. I think the treasurer here probably wouldn't be happy about that. But the Department of Revenue will reimburse it along with their tax return or add it to it, or they'll adjust it at time of taxes.
And this program just started in 2009?
There was one that if somebody was totally 100% disabled and age 65 and entered the service from Wisconsin, for the past 2 years that's been the law. They can get their property taxes back. However, they have to pay them first. It's a reimbursement thing.
This has to be service connected?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So,
Is the expectation that the application is going to go through the state to become like Minnesota, where they do not pay taxes to the county? Is that the next step?
I don't think that's going to happen here. That's just my opinion. I think the process is already there. The state of Minnesota just doesn't charge it, similar to our tuition issue with our veterans. They just waive it. Here, I think they want people to apply for it. And so I think that application is going to be a requirement. So it's important. I'm sure some folks will fall through the cracks. I would like to think that they wouldn't, but you know, if you don't come in and apply, it's difficult. If you come in our office and see the numbers of files that we have in there, to try to screen out the numbers of folks that we have 100%. But however, the state keeps track of that. So there is some data there that we can go through that if we know they're 100%ers, we can contact them if we need to. Because it's a great, but it's not intended to pay real estate taxes for businesses or anything else. It's only intended for your domicile, where you live. So people that have, you know, thousands of acres, I wouldn't expect those folks to get their taxes paid. Not to say that they won't be trying, but who knows? So the law isn't totally clear yet. They're finishing it up, and by mid-June, the state will be accepting applications. And then they'll actually issue a letter back to the veteran to send along with their income tax, so that the Department of Revenue knows that when the little space is filled in on the income tax return as property tax credit, they'll have an approval letter from the Veterans Department that authorizes them to get that. Yes?
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification, this is for disabled veterans, 100% disabled, who are 65 and entered the service from Wisconsin, or is that a different
That is
program?
the way it is today.
Okay.
Starting in April of next year, they will get it back for this year. For those people who are 100% disabled, regardless of age, and and they have to have a 5-year state residency requirement. So that'll be part of our work to make sure that the state, so that we prove to the State Department of Veterans Affairs that they have lived and paid taxes in the state for 5 years. Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you, Ron.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Take a break now, or we're going to go into land and water. We got kind of a lengthy. Let's take a break, 10 to 15-minute break. If we can get this back to order, we'd like to do that. If we could get going, I'd like to do that, folks. All right. The next thing on the agenda is number 4.
Actually, it's the cake.
It's the cake. There's a Mr. Standifer.
Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege, if you might. I don't know if everyone is aware that there are slices of St. Patty's Day cake being handed out back here, but what everybody ought to know is that we have a gentleman of many talents here, and Supervisor Horn actually baked this cake.
There you go.
So I think a round of applause is in order for Fred Horn.
I think we should have held off until we're done eating this for.
And I heard it was very good.
Is this another test for your daughter's wedding? It is. So what Ken is a supervisor told me to do is, I have a daughter getting married August 1st. She's asked me to do the wedding cake, and I'm using you guys as guinea pigs for
Okay, we're going to take resolution number 4, and I'd ask Mr. Retz to bring that to the floor.
I move to bring resolution number 4 to the floor this time and ask explanation of the program or the plan from Bob Heisey.
And the second is Dan Rabel. There's a motion on the floor then for to adopt the land and water management plan, and we'll now hear from Bob. He'll discuss that plan for us.
All right, good morning. On behalf of the Land and Water Conservation Committee and Department, what I want to do is present to you our amended Land and Water Resource Management Plan. This is a plan that we've had in place since 2000, and then again we amended it in 2003. So this is again just an update. Each one of you should have received a copy of this plan. In it was like a short memo. You should have all the material. I'm sure many of you spent this weekend reading the document back to back, but for those who didn't, I'll just take a few minutes and share with you a little bit about the plan. What I want to focus on is really the 3 Ps. I want to talk a little bit about the purpose, I want to talk about the process, and then I want to talk about the product itself, or plan content. Essentially, the plan is really governed by statute Chapter 92. 9210 really is a function of Chapter 92, which states the requirements in our Land and Resource Management Planning Program. 9210, Appearance 6, lists many of the activities or essentially elements which need to be incorporated into the plan as you amend the plan. Once you receive the approval of the plan, then counties are able to receive annual allocations to their department for implementing the plan. And that comes in a form of staff granting and also other dollars that become available to us to work with our landowners installing best management practices. Now that's the state's requirements. Again, I have other reasons why I think this plan is very important for us as a department, as a manager of that department, because it helps guide, for us, it helps guide our activities and our staff. It helps define boundaries so our staff are not working on things that are outside the plan itself, and it also sets priorities for us so we stay focused. Now that was the purpose. Now I want to talk a little bit about the planning process. We actually began this planning process or amending the plan back in May of last year. We formed together a technical advisory committee, and if you will, essentially on the index in the second page, it's like double I, would give the names of those that participated in our technical advisory committee and also those that assisted us with our citizen Advisory Committee. The technical committee met 3 times to identify resource concerns and define activities. Then in September, we met with the Citizen Advisory Group, and we met 1 time to share with the Citizen Advisory Group our resource concerns and help them identify if essentially are we on track with what we identified and give us some feedback. And so that's what they did. And again, this is a short list of some of the resource concerns that were identified by the Citizen Advisory Committee, but essentially it was a protection of our groundwater, loss of agricultural lands, the excessive nutrients and sediment pollution entering our surface waters, loss of aquatic shoreline habitat, and then again, loss of upland habitat. Now you can tell from the Citizen Advisory Committee, land fragmentation was a big issue, and that really reinforced many of the concepts and identify resource concerns that was brought up by the technical committee. Now the remaining slides, we're going to talk pretty much about the product or the plan content. The plan has 4 goals. These are essentially the same 4 goals that were established in our plan in 2000 and also 2003. Although there was considerable debate on amending some of our goals, in the end they stayed the same language as we had in our past plans. And really, as you start looking over that, it really identifies and really nails down really what we do in the department. For our department, we really focus on minimizing the effects of non-point pollution. And we do this by working with our agricultural community, and we also do this by working with our development community. And one of the ways that we do that is back in 2002, the state came up with what we call state runoff performance standards and prohibitions. Now they developed standards for agricultural, they established standards for construction site, and they also established standards for transportation. Essentially what we're focusing on is standards for our agriculture and our development communities. We do this by many different ways. I mean, by and large, we get compliance essentially by voluntary compliance working with our landowners. They see it's the right thing to do, and we get compliance with these standards by installing various best management practices. Other ways that we can get compliance working towards these goals would be in our farmland preservation program. Landowners that are involved in the farmland preservation program have to follow standards. That would be a way of also getting compliance. We get compliance working establishing these requirements in our ordinances. And finally, when we have to, we deal with complaints, and we can deal with complaints on a voluntary process, which that's the way we hope to get things accomplished. And then there's also the enforcement mechanism if we have to get to that point. What sets this plan a little bit different than our last plan? In 2003, when we developed that plan, we were administering 3 separate watersheds. We had the South Fork of the Hay River watershed, we had the Kinnickinnick watershed, and we had the Lake Cluster watershed that we were all administering. Since that time, the Hay River watershed had terminated, and so has the lakes, and the Kinnickinnick watershed will terminate at the end of this year. So what we're trying to do is develop what is our new strategy, or what is our high priority area for resource concerns. And the way we started looking at this is we chose the St. Croix Basin as our highest priority. We're working from bigger to smaller now. And then within the St. Croix Basin, then we started looking at waters, what we call impaired waters, or TMDLs. TMDL stands for total maximum daily load, and these are impaired waters at this point. These, so we're looking at those water resources. Those waters in St. Croix County that are impaired or that are classified as TMDLs are Squaw Lake, Cedar Lake. Lake Malibu is in the planning process now. We're very close to putting that plan and submitting that to EPA. And then that would include the entire Willow River watershed at that point. Within that, then we'd be working with landowners and preservation program, working on any permitted facilities. When I say permitted facilities, I'm talking about facilities that have 1,000 animal units or more. That's considered a permitted facility. And then again, dealing with any sort of complaints. Here, the green area, well, maybe green. The larger area here is all the watershed essentially that drains to the St. Croix Basin. So that would be the area essentially that we started looking at, which is about 3/4 of the county. This actually changes or drains to the Chippewa Basin. Within that area, we'd then again be focusing on Squaw Lake up here, Cedar Lake, and then Lake Malibu and the entire Willow River watershed is our area of focus. And again, what made us kind of steer or come to that conclusion is over the past 15 years, there's been a considerable amount of science, research, documents published that were worked in the St. Croix Basin, along with the showing impairments in the Willow River watershed itself. And again, that drew our really culminated and drew our conclusion to that would probably be the area of highest priority in St. Croix County for us to be working on. Plus, it also lines up with the goal setting session, or one of the goal setting strategies that you had identified last year in your session, was that you were looking at to reduce nutrients and sediment runoff by 20% by 2020. And that really lines up with this document of the St. Croix Basin phosphorus-based water quality goals for 2004. So those, both of those strategies support each other. The plan itself is, well, Appendix B in the back of your plan sets out a 2-year work plan. In that plan, it identifies our goals. It talks a little bit about who our partners would be to help us assist with some of those activities. It lays out our activities, and then it establishes, estimates staff hours and staff costs with that. The next appendix, Appendix C, really lays out a 5-year timeline on activity implementation, if you will. Now, this plan is a 5-year plan. This is something that we do on a 5-year basis. But as we talked with both of the committees, we asked them to vision out further than 5 years. Let's look out there 10, 20 years on this rather than just a 5-year vision. Whenever public monies are invested in any of these, it's important that we become accountable. And so we can measure some of our successes. And that's unlike what's expected of some of our financial institutions nowadays, but we do take this very seriously and look at monitoring some of our successes. So we do stream monitoring on a regular basis. We do drinking water programs. We're on our 3rd round working through the county on our drinking water program. We do our Transect survey. That's an annual survey that predicts soil erosion on crop fields, and we can do that on a sub-basin region. And then we do also track all of our activities and submit some of those reports and plans to Department of Ag. One other component that they request as one of the elements under Chapter 92 is to develop an information and education program or strategy. That is one area I believe our department excels at very well and does a great job. Not only do we work with landowners on a one-on-one, but we also conduct various presentations and workshops throughout the year. we work with school districts throughout the county. Often we have contacts with well over 3,000 to 4,000 students in outdoor education, and those could be in the classroom or those could be in outdoor classroom. So we have a great involvement with our education outreach program. And this kind of brings us here today. We held our public hearing December 4th. The LCC reviewed our plan, the final draft, if you will, December 18th. We sent that plan down to DADCAP to be handed out and be prepared for a presentation to the Land and Water Board on February 3rd. I met with the Land and Water Board on February 3rd. We did receive approval. At the same day, the committee met and recommended the resolution to be brought forward and the plan to be presented to County Board, and that brings us here today. The plan does meet all the statutory requirements under Chapter 92. There is ambitious goals and objectives in this plan, and it should be. And again, what was presented at the Land and Water Board is outcomes of this plan are really dependent upon funding. And with that, I will close. Yeah, Darryl.
If I recall correctly, the reason we're meeting today instead of tomorrow is to adopt this plan. Is
no,
that correct?
floodplain.
The other one?
Floodplain.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Dave.
Believe it or not, I did read this.
Thank you.
I looked through, and would you maybe on page 14 you have a groundwater contamination potential ranking by watershed. Could you have enough information there to maybe just give me a highlight on that? I'm interested in that score of 81.7 for Kinnickinnick River. Is that a bad score or is that a good score? I was having a little trouble kind of decipher what that was actually meaning. Page 14.
Yeah, I got you. These on page 14, what it says is 172 wells were tested for essentially for nitrates, and 25% of those exceeded the. What's that?
Was it nitrates, I believe?
Yeah, it was for nitrates, and that exceeded the 10 parts per million, and 60% exceeded the PAL, which is over 2 parts per million. When we start exceeding 2 parts per million, at that point, we've already seen some human behavior as a result of affecting those wells. Once it gets above 10 parts per million, then it's a very concern for drinking water, especially for pregnant women and young children. That's where it really becomes an issue. So is that high? I'm going to guess in that Kinnickinnick watershed, there's going to be areas that are probably higher than other ones, and yes, that is an area of concern. And that's one of the things that we try tracking. And if you notice on page 19, we'll give you a map of all our well tests that we've done over the series of years. And again, that just helps us track and monitor, if you will, our groundwater that's in St. Croix County. Now, is that high among all the other ones? It seems to be high on that. Yeah, I would say that was probably fairly high. That would be an area of concern. Now, what particular 25% of those are, David? And I don't know, and I guess that's the devil's in the details on that is location. Charlie.
Yeah, and the rain barrels you distribute, what do
Yeah.
they do with that water? They collect it, what's the purpose of it?
It's no different than years ago when your dad put a rain barrel out and collected water probably off the barn, use it for various sources. We're asking folks, it's more of a water conservation measure, and folks are using it to water their garden, to water their house plants or any of those things. I mean, some of these folks connect these things in series, so rather than just one barrel outside the downspout, they might have a collection of 5 or 6 of them and use them then to water the garden. Oh, I'm sorry.
One of the surface water goals, number 13, is to develop a no phosphorus fertilizer ordinance. I've been noticing on the internet that there is state legislation almost ready for the governor to sign, I think, that would basically say that fertilizer could not be sold for use on lawns unless a test showed that phosphorus really was needed by that particular lawn.
Right.
And that's similar to legislation that has passed in Minnesota 4 or 5 years ago. So if this passes on the state level, can we just check that one off as done?
Yep, there would be no point in being redundant on that. But again, that really picked up momentum here just in the past few months. Yes.
If we approve this plan, are we approving dollars also at the same
No,
time?
no. Those are just, that's part of the work plan itself. Is essentially, that's what we have to do. We have to put staff hours and we have to put associated dollars. Again, as I close, this is really, the plan and the outcomes are really dependent upon available funding.
And are there grant monies applied to this then?
Grant monies do apply to this plan, having the plan approved, yes. And those grant dollars, like as I said before, come in a form of staffing dollars and come in a form of dollars for cost sharing with best management programs or practices. Bill.
First, I want to commend you. This is a very well-written report, and it's very logically organized, and you should be proud of your own contributions and your staff contributions. And everybody who's associated with it should be given a vote of thanks, I think. I appreciate especially the attempts to estimate the costs in Appendix B. And of course, I'll be voting for the resolution. But along the same line as the earlier question, I was wondering about the dollar figures in Appendix B.
Mm-hmm.
On Appendix B, number 15, the chart has a summary of the dollar figures that would be going, well, a summary of the dollar figures that would be needed.
Right.
Now, how much of this would be extra and how much of it is already in the 2009 budget?
Here's how I came up with those numbers. I really used our monies that we had for 2009, looking at what we received from the state. Now, we're essentially at pretty close to $1 million budget, and about 50% comes in from state dollars, and about 50% comes in from county allocation or tax levy dollars. So that's really the way I really built some of this on is looking at, so essentially a lot of those, if you're asking what are state dollars and what are county dollars, these are essentially our county dollars right now, looking at. If that's, did I answer your question right?
Not sure.
Okay.
What I was asking is, are the dollar figures that are in this summary the dollar figures that are included in our current budget or the LWCD current budget for 2009, or are we talking about extra over and above the current budget?
No, this would be, these are dollars that are reflected in this 09's budget.
So we're not talking, when you were talking about grants and the necessity for state contributions over and above, what figures are you talking about? are you talking about the necessity to have additional dollars of enlargement numbers from both the county and the state?
I see that.
Or any other grants?
Sure, I see opportunities with the what I call the TMDL of the Willow River watershed itself. Once that gets submitted to EPA, I see that as a high priority to get funded through EPA. So I see that as a possibility. On the other hand, if you read the state budget, there's proposed cuts for our SWRM program. So, you know, where does this all going to come and land? I don't know. But that's, again, why I shared with the Land and Water Board is outcomes of the plan are a direct result of funding.
So for our vote in favor of this plan, we are voting for something that is a little bit nebulous. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I don't agree at all. Again, the plan B is really the best estimate or guesstimate, if you will. We needed to put something together, and I did my best job with looking at the staff that I had, the current budget that I had, and try to allocate those out. That was my best educated guess at that bill. No, I think the plan is the plan. It identifies our resource needs, our resource concerns, and you know that comes first, and the dollars need to follow that. That's the way I look at that.
Thinking of the ethanol situation, farmers grow corn, grains, and so forth. The phosphorus for the fertilizer, I'm not real familiar with the plan here. Does that affect the growing of corn and other grains?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have any effect on that. But what we would do, what we'd like to do with some of those landowners that are growing perhaps more corn or soybeans, well, corn perhaps, but trying to limit the amount of phosphorus that they would apply on their land based the crop needs. Now, if you looked at the price of phosphorus and nitrogen lately, they're going to do that themselves. We don't need to guide them. Just the cost of that's going to guide them to do that. Yeah, Ken.
Having lived in many states and currently own property that we have rural water systems, you're talking about some of the damages to our underground waters. Has there been any looking at the idea of putting in county-wide water, municipal water type systems? Or is that something that you guys wouldn't even look at, even though we've got contaminated wells and you're looking at the contaminated well part of it?
Yeah, in a rural area, that right now that's not something that we're looking at. We, the county, when I say the county, I'm saying land conservation and support with the planning and zoning and both committees, had worked with USGS in developing a groundwater model, if you will, the best case scenario on that, which gives us a little bit better idea on how we might model different scenarios in the county. Now, to get back to your question, perhaps in developments, we may start looking at shared wells in the future. What we would look at, Ken, is how do we keep those contaminants from getting into the wells? Okay, that's what we would be looking at, those effects. Have we identified the sinkholes and some of those, and are there better ways of handling some of that runoff than perhaps spending the extreme capital costs?
Yeah, where I was looking at is because you did, in the Kinnickinnick area, you said where there's a lot of wells that are already contaminated, that, you know, concept, where I have one of my properties at, that's what's already happened. It's beyond any hope, and we're now looking at having to put in the rural water system for about 1,000 units over an area of about, I suppose about 70 miles of putting it in. So
Of piping public
correct,
water?
correct.
Okay.
Along with multiple towers, which in the secondary effect, which now reduces rates for fire problems because they now have fire hydrants every so often and stuff like that. So it's a combination of things that would be affected by an idea of putting in a group water system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't looked at in that source, but I know there are just outside New Richmond's doing probably a similar thing as far as piping public water out to those folks. Yeah.
Just the question I have, I guess, is looking at, for instance, what you had in your appendix for timeline of activity, right, under the agricultural land portion,
And that is
C2.
C2.
You were mentioned about items 2 and 3 were to implement farmland preservation program and to partner to protect agricultural land.
Okay.
On page 53 of the report, you have as one of your activities, says to assist in the planning and zoning department, the towns in the development of local purchase of development rights and to transfer those development rights.
Mm-hmm.
We received at our last planning and zoning meeting this thing here about the Wisconsin Working Lands Initiative, and I'm assuming this probably ties in with your group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that I've worked on.
Where my concern starts to come in. For instance, one of the on the matching grant, they talk about to support local initiatives to permanently protect farmland through voluntary purchase of development rights or PACE programs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's my concern.
Okay.
We have private property. We have what this seems to open the door for a government group to do, to purchase a development right. I find that a little disturbing from the standpoint that as a landowner, I believe I only have that right for the while that I own the property. Maybe I'm a little short on cash and I'm able to negotiate with the government group to line my pocket with some money at taxpayer expense. But the right that is gone has a right that's been sold goes beyond the term of that ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be a little problematic in that why could I, being the landowner, all of a sudden benefit from a right that should be going on to whoever owns that property in later years?
Then again, I got to answer that in about two different ways. First of all, when you start looking at the purchase of agriculture or conservation easements, it's a voluntary program. So if you have concerns on entering into that from on the get-go, I would caution you about entering into a long-term permanent easement. Then there's other parts of that program that can still protect agriculture without entering into a long-term permanent program. However, the initiative in Wisconsin is to begin starting to preserve ag for long term.
But I'm still saying it's the government that's proposing and throwing the carrot out there to entice a person that's trying to sell a right that he no longer can have after he relinquishes ownership. That's the part, the easement that gives up, and it also takes that out of any governmental body to overturn it. Because once it goes to an easement, then my understanding is that it has to go through the courts.
There are probably ways that you can get out of it. It's going to be difficult. Again, I don't think anybody's enticing anybody. I think it's a volunteer program, and you enter into it knowing all those things, all those requirements, right from the start.
You're still missing my point.
I'm sorry.
You're missing the point. You're asking a person to sell a right that they can't sell.
No, I'm not asking you to. You don't have to. It's voluntary. Okay. Bill.
Could you address the question about monitoring surface waters
Mhm.
a little
Yeah.
bit? Because
We-
I think that is kind of a weakness of this, in this program.
It is a weakness. Again, DNR has a gauge in the Willow River that they do gauge and do certain water quality monitoring on a periodic basis. What we do, because we don't have the money and the funding that would support some of this stuff. It's very costly to do on a regular basis. So what we do is we use volunteers. Landowners that work on certain segments of streams and take water sampling, water chemistry at certain times during the year. They do different macro invertebrate identification, and these are all identifiers, and they can help identify if the stream is improving by some of those macro invertebrates, or they can see that the stream is degrading by the lack of or different forms of those. So each and every year we're getting more and more people to volunteer to do this, gather this information, and then they bring it back to us, and we then plug the database into the DNR. That's what we're doing as far as our monitoring right now. It's called, what it's called is a WAVE. It's Water Action Volunteers.
In one of the sections that addresses the people who would, or the organizations who would actually be doing some of the monitoring, and it includes the OWCD and University of Wisconsin Extension. I was wondering whether or not it might be possible to also bring in the people at UW River Falls and have them either on a contractual basis or as part of a regular series of courses that they have to do water monitoring in the county, and maybe Pierce County as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. We work with the staff at River Falls quite a bit, and so yeah, that would be something that we could work with them on. Perhaps even some intern students or some of their students could even work on some of that. So good point.
Okay, Bob. I think we can move on from here.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any particular questions that somebody has? If not, there's a motion on the floor to approve this resolution. It was seconded.
He already seconded.
Yeah, he seconded. Okay, all those in favor of that resolution, that's resolution number 5 or 4, respond by saying yes. Yes. Those opposed, say, got 1 no and 30 yes. Okay. The next thing we have on the agenda is number 6, that's planning and zoning. Or number 5, approval of the flood plan. I'm sorry. Yeah. I checked it wrong. I shouldn't have.
Mr. Chairman, I move to bring
Yes.
this to the floor and have Kevin Grable explain why it's urgent.
Right. Okay. Okay, who seconded that over here? Lauren did. Come on up, Ken.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Grabo from Planning and Zoning. In a nutshell, the reason we're here today is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has updated the FIS, which is the flood insurance study, and also have updated the FIRMS, which are the flood insurance rate maps for the county. The last set of maps we have dated back into the mid-70s, and so they got around to updating the maps, and as a part of being able to use those maps, they require the county by ordinance to accept the flood insurance study and the FIRMS, which are the rate maps. So we have to do that by ordinance and able to incorporate those maps, use those maps, and it has to be done through ordinance. The second thing is in this process, the Department of Natural Resources has made a few updates, corrections to their model floodplain ordinance, in which the counties can base their floodplain ordinance on. And the only changes that we have made to the floodplain ordinance have been to include the flood insurance study, include the rate maps, and a couple of very minor changes that the DNR required us to make. So I'm not sure if there's questions, extra explanations, anything? Yes.
So is this document an amendment, or is this the amendments in the document?
The amendments are in the document. What I gave Cindy was I gave her the cover ordinance and with the attachment, which was the changes that were made to the ordinance, which were very minor, and this is the final version.
But you're asking us to approve the amendments, so I don't see them in here.
Right.
So how can I approve that?
You could ask our committee members if you'd like to. I had them up on the website. I should have sent the amendments to the county board showing the actual changes within the document.
I can't approve something I don't know what's here.
Okay, here's the story. If this isn't approved today, then the county's out of the insurance floodplain program. So.
Well, then how can I approve something though, if I don't have the information here in front of me?
If you want to, I could bring it up on the board. You could look through them quick. I could go through the changes.
Good idea.
Yep.
So basically what you said is there's not a single change in here other than changes mandated by FEMA and the DNR.
Correct.
So nothing that we wanted.
The county made no additional changes at all. Nope. Only those mandated by the DNR and FEMA.
Kevin, weren't some of the changes with the floodplain maps? Because all the communities were revising theirs that I know about. In other words, some of those floodplain maps were corrected or amended to show actual flooding areas.
Right. They updated the maps. There's over 100 maps. They're in that box. And those are the ones. See, the way FEMA works is they say this. They say, we update these maps. We're putting a date on the map. And by this date, you will accept those by the county by ordinance, or you're out of the program. I mean, that's the way they work. I called and talked to them. I tried to get the date moved back, and they said, nope, we don't change our dates. You do it by this date, or you're out.
As a member of the committee, we've seen the changes. The changes are less restrictive than they were before. The DNR is a little less restrictive than IR, so I think that particular part of it is an improvement, if you ask me. But most of this is housekeeping. The DNR or the FEMA changed the rules. We need to have this enacted by tomorrow. That's why we're meeting today instead of tomorrow. And it was a good document. It still is a good document, and the changes were minor just to make us eligible to stay in the insurance program.
Yep.
And if it's any consideration, I even agreed with it.
I apologize. I should have sent the county board the document that still had the corrections in it in my haste to make sure we had a final product ready today. I just the changes were so minor, and we weren't adding anything additional as the county that I didn't get that to you.
Ken, I'd like to have Greg, our corporate counsel, address this.
The first page of the ordinance amendment says that the ordinance is changed as shown on the attachments. Unfortunately, the attachments don't show the changes, but we need to have them attached to the official copy of the ordinance because there's no way to track the changes without a great deal of problem if we don't have that. So I would like to ask the board to, if you do adopt the ordinance, to do it on condition that the marked up version of the changes of the ordinance, which was prepared, be attached to the official copy of the ordinance so that the clerk has a record of it.
In the essence of time, Gene, you made the motion, and I think Lauren, you seconded it. You agree to that, adding that on?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we'll do it. Okay. You have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Carried.
I can. Do you want both? Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, let's have, Dave, you want to take the next, number 6? Planning and Zoning Committee report on the Clean Sweep program and the funding of that program.
Good morning. You should have a handout in your packet, not in your packet, but left on your desk this morning from the county clerk that we passed on. And the first, it's a 3-page or 3-sheet stapled handout. The first page says useful concepts and facts for making a difference. The third page, the second sheet, talks about the Northwest Clean Sweep program, and the third page is a chart off of an Excel spreadsheet about our county clean sweep program. I'm going to try to make this as brief and succinct as I can, but it's a bit of a complicated situation we find ourselves in. And it involves our clean sweep program, which we have operated to collect farm, business, and household hazardous wastes in the county since continuously since 1994, and we did our first in 1989. And the third chart, the third page, shows the results of those collections, to where last year between the two collections in the Hudson and New Richmond areas, spring and fall, we collected over 40,000 pounds of hazardous waste and had them properly disposed of in hazardous waste facilities. The concern here is the funding for that program and the dilemma we find ourselves in regarding that funding. Last year, the Finance Committee and County Board approved an annual budget a little more than $50,000 for this particular program. As a part of that budget, we projected revenues through state grants a little over $30,000. We submitted that application and actually had that grant approved last fall, but much to our dismay, the governor's budget proposes to eliminate all of the clean sweep funding, and it would take effect for this year. And we've been notified and been put on hold with that grant funding while the budget is being considered. Our dilemma that we discussed with the committee, and just this last week at their committee meeting, and after we discussed it with the committee and had input from Chuck Whiting, who was there, decided that we should bring this situation to the full county board. Normally, from a funding standpoint, we would have consulted with the finance committee, but time is of the essence. We have our first collection, which is typically our largest and most substantial collection of the year, tentatively scheduled for May. We won't know the outcome of the budget process likely until the end of June, if not later. And so we have to make a decision about how to proceed with this year's collection. After a lot of deliberation with the committee, what the committee endorsed and wanted to review with the county board this morning is that we would go forward with the collection in May, not knowing the outcome of the budget until after the collection. And if we are successful, and I can assure you there is a statewide movement that we will participate in to restore the clean sweep funding into the program, or into the state budget, and we will submit comments along with a lot of other participants, counties and municipalities, to the Joint Finance Committee during their deliberations to do just that. We would propose that we go forward with our May collection, and we will then decide whether or not to go forward with the September collection pending the outcome of the budget.
and what the committee discussed that approach and wanted to bring that forward basically to the board for an endorsement of taking that approach. We certainly feel fiscally responsible relative to the revenues, but this has been an incredibly important and well-received program through the county. As you can see in the chart on the third page, the participation in this program throughout the county has increased over the years. And again, as of last year, we just processed the largest amount we ever have. Our concern is if we don't have this program, if we don't have this available in St. Croix County, what will happen with the waste? And we felt that the proposal to go forward with the May collection and revisit the September collection, depending on the outcome of the budget and our collective success with our peers around the state to restore the funding in the budget, will depend on just that. We'll see what happens with the state budget and decide on September, depending the outcome. I've made that as short and clear as I can. I know it's complicated. I apologize for you not being able to see the materials prior to the meeting, but we just had our first opportunity, given the timing of the state budget, to review this with our committee last week. They felt it's very important, and from a program standpoint, and it was unanimous to bring this forward, and propose it in this fashion. And we would hope, with your endorsement, we'll move forward with the May collection and see what we can do to get the funding restored, and that'll determine the outcome for September. Supervisor Kramer?
Exactly what are you proposing?
We're proposing to go forward and conduct the May collection, the household hazardous waste, the farm waste, and small business waste, which we typically run here in Hudson, out of the Hudson area, out of the highway shop on Highway 12. We would go forward with that collection, not yet knowing the outcome of the budget and the potential income on our grant revenues.
What I had in mind was dollar figures, and or whether you just want a resolution, a sense of the board about going ahead and conducting the Clean Sweep program. Do you need dollars, or do you need to have just a resolution in support?
I guess formally we weren't even sure in our committee discussions what we did need, and I think that where we came down was, absent the opportunity to review this with a finance committee because of the committee schedule, we would bring this forward and ask for the support of the full board. Errol? Yes, our total budget is a little over $50,000, and typically our May collection it's split about, I'd say, 60-40 between the May collection and the September collection. So we're looking at an expenditure of about $30,000 roughly for the May collection. We only have $20,000 of levy funds scheduled for this. So our shortfall, if we only do the May collection, would be about $10,000 if we can't get the funding restored.
Supervisor Standifer, you had a question.
Comment. Well, I think there's an alternative. You're proposing that we go ahead with the May Clean Sweep. The alternative is not to do it. I don't find that an acceptable alternative. Not to conduct this very successful program, in my view, would be to encourage illegal dumping. It would be to encourage retention of chemicals in storage facilities that are unsafe and unwise, and I think it would be irresponsible of us not to continue to conduct the Clean Sweep program.
John Morton.
I noticed in the last 6 years it's varied up to 25% more than it had previously. What changes have taken place in the recent years of the program of what it had early years?
I don't have a specific, I mean, there's been no particular change in the program. There's been no particular change in the nature of the funding. I think I mean, I can say this honestly that I've been here almost 20 years, and this one program is probably one of the most positively received things we've been involved in. And I think it's just a matter of the acceptance and the reliance of our citizens on having safe disposal of these compounds available, and it's simply, over time, grown to where it is.
Supervisor Malik, you had a comment or a question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in order to focus our efforts on this, I'd like to make a motion. Put up a straw man there, and then we can approve on it or pass it. And the motion would be to turn on the microphone.
Rogers is on, so you don't hear you anyway.
The motion is to authorize the May clean sweep as planned, with funding to come from the contingency fund if required.
Motion made by Mr. Malik, seconded by Stevens to go ahead with the May clean sweep and take what money we get, and if we have to fill in, we will. Mr. Marzoff.
I would like to just add that with the transition from analog to digital television, I would guess that there will be a increased disposal of electronic equipment, much of which has heavy metals in it that, if they leach into the water table, could provide serious consequences. So, like Supervisor Standifer has already indicated, I think it's vital that we support this. It's a different program.
Ken Colby.
Yes, just a little bit for John. I think one of the things that we're seeing is people becoming a lot more in tune to what we have out there for actual dangerous materials, and they're beginning to realize that we can't just throw this stuff out. And the second part would be is I know that there's several communities up and down the river that have these programs that we run it twice a year. I know some of these places that basically run them every month, and they're a lot smaller than we are. Is there any way that spreading it out over a period of time would make it less financially, or I'd want to say less costly, but also the fact that we may get more of the products in instead of, I do know that there are dumpsters where people are throwing stuff into that shouldn't be in there because I've seen it happen. So is there a possibility that we could not just have the two of them, but a way of making it as more of a, quote, monthly or every, whatever, 6 weeks, every other month, something that would be a better return on getting rid of the dangerous materials out there?
We've sort of had an ongoing conversation within our department and our committees over time about having more collections or permanent facilities. And it really does boil down to cost of both staffing and particularly if you got into a permanent site, needing the facilities, maintaining the facilities, permitting the facilities. So we're very sensitive to that, and we see and we hear the pressure growing to expand those services. But to this point, given the funding available, which now the governor is proposing to take away, we just felt that we can't afford to do more than we're doing. But we continue to look at it and consider it because we share your concern that the demand is there.
I, being a member of the committee, of course, will support this motion, this resolution, and I'd just like to encourage all of you supervisors to contact your representatives, your state representatives, to let them know that you really would like the funding restored for this very valuable program for the whole state.
I guess I would like to look at this from a standpoint of consistency, in that I was the one that tried to come forward here back in December from a waste management standpoint to save the homeowners $25, and couldn't get it before this board to, it couldn't come to the open board to talk on that, which would have came to $6,000 that was not budgeted. Now here we are, we find ourselves looking at $10,000 or $30,000 of unbudgeted money that the state has pulled. The homeowner at the time for the $25, when I was trying to lobby for a to stop that $25 increase, was for that homeowner to, in the event that they needed to replace their septic field, and have to come up with $5,000 to $7,000 plus the additional $25, which was $475 for a permit. All of a sudden now, for items that people choose to buy, the paints, the fertilizers and things like that, that they went out and bought, and it's sitting in their garages, now we have the money to share across all of the taxpayers for them to get rid of it. My problem is this: I believe since the people that purchased this items that are now trying to get rid of it, I don't see it as being any different than trying to get rid of an appliance, a TV, or whatever. And I think they can pay some form of an amount per pound that they bring in to get rid of, to help offset this cost. Because this county board did not create this problem. The state did. So I guess I would ask, and maybe what I will say at this point was I would amend the motion to say that anybody wanting to bring in waste, that we come up with a fixed amount per pound that these people will pay to help offset that cost. Because the taxpayers of St. Croix County have already kicked in $20,000. That's my motion.
For discussion purposes, I'll second that.
Yeah, well, you're already paying some on.
My amendment to the motion is I ask that we fix a set amount per pound of the waste coming in for the May cleanup to help offset the dollars.
Would it be a good idea to have the committee discuss it with the zoning department as to what that fee would be? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's just discussion.
We had the opportunity to bring this up when we had our meeting, and we did not, because it's going to be a real problem to determine what are you going to call which chemical, how hazardous. You're going to work by the pounds on that and try to figure out what you're going to charge. In addition, you're going to have somebody maintain the scales, and it has to be an accurate one that we don't have now. So that's another additional cost.
This to me is a very complex issue because I know there are many people that have rural land, and as the fees go up, you get the TVs and the trash on your rural land. So I think we have to somehow moderate this so that the rural landowners don't end up being the landfills. At the county shop, we get dishwashers, everything imaginable because it's dumped off on the roads.
I think that there are some things that government can do better than private industry for the protection of all the citizens of the country. And I do believe that this Clean Sweep program, while it may not be perfect, certainly protects our groundwater, and that's one of the things we were hearing about this morning, is the contamination of our groundwater supplies. So until the Planning and Zoning Committee could come up with some kind of feasible collection fee for these chemicals, I would urge the support of this resolution in its present form.
Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly not opposed to the concept of user fees, but this one does sound especially tricky because we would be talking, I think, about partially emptied containers and trying to estimate the weight of product within the container would, require opening the container, dumping its contents into a weighing pail. I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare, actually. Not to say that the committee shouldn't study this and give us something before September. Maybe there's a way to do it, for instance, including the weight of the container so that it's fairly straightforward to measure it. But to impose that requirement before the May clean sweep just seems utterly impractical, even though I like user fees. So I'm going to oppose my colleague's amendment.
I also believe in users paying for the services that are provided to that user. The problem with this fee, again, with all due respect to the author, is that it's a fee that will disincent performance. And we want to encourage the maximum performance possible. And if this fee would be an impediment to anyone bringing hazardous waste, then it would be counterproductive to the reason to have the program in the first place. And for that reason, I also will need to oppose the amendment.
You want to hear the amendment again, or you've heard it a couple times? Okay. All those in favor of this amendment, vote yes.
Yes.
Opposed? No. It's defeated. Okay, then we will go to, are we done on the discussion as far as the ordinance goes? Okay. All those in favor of the ordinance as this, a resolution is?
It's just a motion.
Oh, it's just a motion. The motion as presented, yes, please.
There was a motion by Supervisor Malek, second by Supervisor Ritz, to authorize the May clean sweep as planned, with funding to come from the contingency fund if required.
Those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Number 7, the ordinance amending Chapter 40 on lodging and food protection. And Esther?
I'll bring it to the floor.
Is there a second? Second. Dave Osnes made a second.
We have staff here today from our public health department. I'll let them introduce themselves. They worked in concert with the Corporation Counsel's office to bring the ordinance modifications to you today. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Wendy. And you need to hit the button. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Wendy Kramer with Public Health, and I have Lori Diaby-Gossama. Okay. Lori is our sanitarian. She works in the agent program at the present time, doing restaurant inspections and other inspections in the county. And Ed Thurman is our environmental health specialist. He is deals with the rabies calls and other environmental health. So I brought them along in case you have any specific questions on the agent program that I'm not quite able to answer. To give you a brief history of how this all came about, last fall I asked staff to come up with creative ideas on how to increase revenue within the health department. And Lori and Ed talked, and they were very creative, and they came up with a proposal to become an agent of the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And with doing that, that would we would be able to do 90 other additional inspections to what we're already doing. It's our present contract is with the Department of Health Services. This other contract that we're looking at would be another agent of the state. And this new proposal would increase revenue by approximately $24,000 for our department. There would be no additional startup costs with this. We already have the agent program with the Department of Health Services in place, and they're very similar. They can almost mesh together, and that's why we decided to look at Ordinance 40 because and adding this contract with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Commerce because they are very similar in the programs and just connect real good together. So we took this proposal to our Health and Human Services Board, and they said, go ahead, see what you can come up with. So we worked with the Corp Council and had the changes made with the present ordinance, and we took that back to our Health and Human Services Board, and with their approval to present it to you as this proposed Chapter 40 ordinance, which would authorize to add the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection inspections within the county. And as you can see in this Chapter 40 ordinance that's in your packet, this would be the retail food establishments that we would be inspecting, in addition to the hotels, restaurants, and vending operations. A and B is what we're already doing. C is the addition to the ordinance that we are asking you to look at.
David? Yep, Wendy or Lori, thank you last week for the meeting that we had, and Corp Council. When we're talking about the retail food, we're talking about the area that is temperature controlled, correct, Lori?
Potentially hazardous.
Lori, why don't you,
Facilities are
Lori,
required to be
why don't you come over here?
For the difference is Department of Ag facilities is retail food establishments. If you're selling food, and if you're selling potentially hazardous food, which means that foods that require temperature control for safety, then you have to be licensed by Department of Agriculture. If you were just going to sell potato chips and root beer, you know, that's not potentially hazardous, then you're not licensed. So it's grocery stores, gas stations, bakeries, delis, those types of facilities. Other potentially hazardous foods that meet the definition of a restaurant, those are the ones we are already doing. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
And then, so, microphone. Yep, I got it on. We talked about float rate and that type of thing. Those places are not covered, correct?
Float right,
The tubing
food
facilities.
stand.
Yep.
At Float Right, they sell foods in the stand where they rent the tubes out. Those are already those are licensed as restaurants, and I already do those inspections. Okay. Go ahead.
Who's doing this job now?
I do the DHS contract, and I have about 360 facilities that I do. The retail food part, the intention of that is to reduce the county appropriations for the environmental health specialist position, and that's Ed Thurman. He will be doing the inspections. Oh, I'm sorry. The state is doing it. So there's a state inspector that's coming into the county, or actually he lives here, and is doing the inspections.
Yes, so we talked about some of the restaurants. The city of New Richmond recently approved a mobile trailer, essentially a kitchen on wheels. Is that included in this as well?
No, it's included in the DHS contract that we already have. I haven't seen that trailer yet, but I've been in contact, with the person. I will be looking at it to do an inspection. That would be licensed as a mobile restaurant. That's not a Department of Ag trailer.
This sounds like it's adding more work to the department, and if so, is that going to lead to a request for an increase in staff in the near future?
I'll let Wendy talk about that one.
We talked about that, and Ed Thurman is going to be taking that on. He's just recently he updated his website, and he's doing some changes in his own schedule so that when people call in, he can refer them to the website rather than spending a half hour, 45 minutes on the phone. So Ed is looking at ways of changing his schedule. So no, we would not be asking for an additional increase in staff with this additional work.
Yes, so it comes back to if we're, it sounds like the county is taking over the role of what the state's been doing now. Is that true?
In this specific program.
Okay, and how is it funded? then if we're taking on work, how are we? So they
Oh,
are gonna,
yeah,
there will be a
ha-
charge?
Yep, there is a fee schedule that's been developed, and depending on the size and the amount of food that's processed or sold, depends on their license fee. And then in addition, we take in the licensing fees, and then we have to pay back usually 10% of that fee back to the state as their administrative cost with this program. I do have, if you're interested, I do have additional copies of what that fee schedule would be, if you would like to see that.
Well, naturally, I'd like to see that.
I'll give it to you.
But I guess the next question was on, since you mentioned the, for pre-inspect, inspect, and investigate vending operations, I'm assuming, and this is opening up to convenience stores and things like that, where you mentioned, for instance, stuff that was refrigerated. I'm assuming you also probably are talking to things, anything dated that has a date time to it, that for life expectancy or whatever.
Lori,
vending is not covered under the Department of Ag contract, the additional contract. Vending is, we are already doing that. That's in the DHS contract. This is for retail food establishments only. The vending program is already covered under our current contract.
Well, you've got it in here saying that you're pre-inspect, inspect, and investigate vending operations.
Correct. We do that already with the DHS contract. See, with the Chapter 40 that you're looking at, the ordinance, the language is already, original Chapter 40 covered the DHS contract. And then when we're considering adding this DATCP contract onto it, rather than having a separate standalone ordinance, working with Greg Timmerman's office, we're just amending the current contract. So we're adding in the additional facilities.
So we're adding in, actually, that's where I'm trying to go here, is that we're adding in stuff that was done by the state and putting that as a county responsibility now to monitor.
A county opportunity, yes. That's the way I choose
see
to
that
look
as a
at it.
County, I wouldn't call it an opportunity.
I think we're all coming at this from different directions, trying to get an idea of the scope. Can you give us an idea of the scope by, let us say, estimating the number of establishments, or the number of licenses, or the number of permits, in addition to what you are currently doing, that will be added?
We're looking at 90 additional establishments.
Will you, if I may follow up, will you generally be on a 3-year cycle with surprise visits, or what do you propose?
Those are annual inspections that are done. And they change, the date. They might inspect, within 3 months they would go back and inspect on an annual basis. And then there are annual licensing fees that go along with this.
Wendy, is this the same situation as years ago when Lori was brought on board, that the state didn't have the staff resource to come out and to effectively inspect our facilities? Is that the same situation now? No?
No, that's not the same. This is looking at increasing revenue within the health department.
Any other questions of the panel? John?
It sounds like to me that the state employee up in this area, does he just cover St. Croix County or additional counties? Or is there going to be a layoff there, or what's the situation?
Lori has talked with this person that does that.
I've spoke to the Department of Ag regional office and the inspector itself in St. Croix County. He will not lose his job. They will just be readjusting his workload area. They're through attrition, they're having some retirements, so they're redistricting their workloads anyway. So I mean, he's absolutely not going to lose his job.
It sounds like a good deal for the county, frankly, and for Department of Health. What is the motivation at the state level for doing this?
There's kind of always an ebb and flow and adjustments, but, you know, between centralized and decentralized. But the incentive is they encourage agents because local inspectors or local people, they think, you know, they argue the benefits or the disadvantages, but you're here, you're in the county, you know the people, you know the facilities. There's some advantage to that.
Having been a government employee for a long, long time, I can see where the short term this might be a good thing, but what happens next year when the state is in a bigger budget and they go, oops, we made a mistake, then where are we going to be standing? How are we going to be able to fund it?
It's not we're making the money on it. It's not costing us, and we can adjust our fee schedule to match our costs. So if our costs increase, then we increase our fee schedule.
I'd like to ask one thing. Will this change make it easier to have a one-stop shop for all of the people covered under this ordinance?
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, like, if you imagine yourself stepping into a gas station / grocery store / whatever, you know, these facility types are not always black and white. There's gray involved in it. And so, you know, there's a memorandum of understanding that these places, when at all possible, you have one license. So you're not having dual licenses. So it's kind of a one-stop shop, if you will.
I'm just, again, I'm going to take the other side of this because it looks to me like an expansion of government. You made a statement there that just scares the bejeebies out of me. In the event that we think we need more people, we'll just raise fees. At what point, you just said that in the event that you would be cost neutral, that you would raise your costs to meet to what you felt was the demand. So it again comes out onto the public, these establishments trying to stay open and trying to sell a product. To me, that statement you said there was like a threat. That's the reason that needs to be controlled and held in check.
The state does the same thing. When their costs increase, they increase the fee schedule. That's the way they do it.
Is the state going to reduce their fee?
No.
So we're just adding on.
We are going to have the exact same fees. We're not charging any more than what the state would. Our fee schedule that we're proposing is the exact same fee schedule that the state charges.
This gives us
Okay.
local control.
Yep.
Do you want the state to do it or let the county do it?
I call for the question.
Okay. At this point, there is a motion on the floor to accept this ordinance and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Aye. Motion carries. Ron, are you making a report today, Ron? Pardon me? Yes. Let's do that right now.
We'll introduce Ron Lockwood from our long-term support unit. Ron's been the coordinator of that unit for some time, and he is going to give an update on activity for our annual report for 2008. So Ron, with that, if you can cover some of the detail, and I'm sure some of this will sound familiar when Ron starts to talk about long-term care reform. Thank you.
Well, we continue to... Is that me? And during this past year, we continue to administer the Home and Community-Based Waiver Program, which is financed by medical assistance. And it involves mainly federal and state aid, but there's also quite a bit of county money involved. And over the years, more and more county money was required because the state froze their contribution about 12 years ago. In collaboration with several other neighbor counties, including Eau Claire, Chippewa, Dunn, and Pierce counties, St. Croix County decided to basically transfer the home and community-based waiver program to a private nonprofit corporation headquartered in Eau Claire, Community Health Partnership. And we did complete that transfer of responsibility by transferring almost 300 persons from September 1 of 2008 to February of 2009. Now, basically what that means is that we're turning over the responsibility for providing long-term care services to persons with developmental disabilities, to elderly persons, and also younger physically disabled persons. The amount of funds involved, excluding county dollars, was about $10 million, a little over $10 million. Of those persons, 250 of those 300 persons basically chose to go with Community Health Partnership. Because the state of Wisconsin only certified one managed care entity to administer the services to people in the future, the federal government required that there be an opt-out provision, and 46 persons selected that opt-out. It's called the IRIS program, and basically the state of Wisconsin selects an independent agent to administer the services for those persons. It provides more choice for the consumer, the person, disabled person that's receiving the services, and the family or guardian, if there's a guardian involved, especially for persons with mental retardation. And they have more options with regard to what kind of services to purchase with the monies available and who to buy the services from. The disadvantage for those people that chose that option was that they have a fixed budget to work with. It's determined by the functional screen, the end of the functional screen that determines whether or not they're eligible programmatically. Persons with higher acuity that are more impaired get a bigger budget per month to purchase services. The advantage of going with a managed care entity is that they get a fixed capitation, or so much per month, to provide services to all the people in the population. They can spend more.
To do county business. There's the tool for car rental is at the bottom of that page. We've had some questions about that. And if anybody wants to take a look at it, give us a call, we'll show you.
I decided that I wanted to show you people that work in the health department and just show you some of our programs and how we are related to the state statute. So thank you for your time, and I'll try and keep it brief and not too long for you. Do I point it at this thing, Cindy?
Just click it wherever.
Okay, all right. In 2007, we updated our mission and vision for public health. It's similar to what we've had previous years, but this is new and updated for us. State statutes in public health revolve around the core functions of assessment, assurance, and policy development. You'll hear this terminology several times as people talk about public health. Chapter 250 of the state statutes describe the 10 essential services, and this comes directly out of the state statutes. And this describes the services that public health does. And I can give you more specifics if you want, but if you look at these, it's a pretty fair description of everything that we do in public health. So this is Patty Jackson, our public health secretary. I called her the hub of our wheel. She keeps us on track. She orders our supplies. She gives us calls and all of that. And the circle next to her, again, is the describes public health, the assurance, assessment, policy development, and inside that are the 10 essential services. These are the top pictures is Sharon Razor, our public health supervisor, Heather Prigge, Kathy Fredrickson, Sue Lindberg, and Jennifer Hansen are our public health nurses. And I'm talking about communicable disease control, which is state statute chapter 252. This program involves our immunizations, and this will come out in the annual report, but we had 1,227 individuals that we immunized in 2008. And I guess I would tie that into essential service number 7, helping people receive health services. In addition, the public health nurses will do disease investigation and control. For example, we had a pertussis outbreak in one of the schools in the county, so we contacted close contacts of a child, their family members, and then the kids that sat around this other child, we contacted them as close contacts. And by doing that, public health was able to assist in the control of the pertussis disease outbreak and help stop that spread. The bottom picture is staff people in our preparedness program. In this picture, we're doing respiratory fit testing. We do this on an annual basis so that when we put on our N95 masks in the event of a disease outbreak like anthrax or SARS or anything like that, that the staff will be protected in the work that they may have to do out in the community. Chapter 253 statute deals with our maternal child health. Some of the services that we are presently doing in the maternal child health program is our dental health services. This past year we saw 123 children ages 6 months through 5 years and applied dental varnish to the teeth of these children to help prevent the tooth decay. Our prenatal care coordination, we served 134 women with the goals of the program to improve birth outcomes and reduce barriers to prenatal care. Our children and youth with special health care needs, we served 21 children, providing resource and referral services and some home visiting to these children. The health check screening, we served a total of 100 people, 42 children without health insurance or high deductibles. We did health screenings on 24 adults, and 65 infants and children received services under the Medicaid program. This health check screening is a head-to-toe physical exam for these people, and referrals if indicated. This is our reproductive health staff. We have Jay Hay, who's a reproductive health nurse, Jan Ray, who is a contract nurse practitioner, Ellen Rominski is a reproductive health aide, and Roxanne Crows is a program assistant. We served 1,261 clients in 2008 with the above services. This is our WIC program staff. We have Teresa Quam and Ruth Lehman as registered dietitians, Ellen Rominski, Tracy Shug-Peterson, and Diane Demuline as WIC clerk aides. Let's see, we were contracted by the WIC program to serve 971 clients per month, and this caseload increased to 1,074 clients in 2008. So again, this demonstrates the economic impact that the people in St. Croix County are seeing. This is an income-based service. It's a nutrition program, promotes and maintains the health and well-being of nutritionally at-risk pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum women, infants, and children. This is Artis Kelly. She is our health benefits counselor. She answers questions about medical assistance eligibility, private health insurance, dental health needs, exams, and etc. We also have an emergency medical fund, which is a grant fund from the United Way. We receive money from the United Way that if we have someone come into our office that does not have health insurance, how we can get them referred on to the physician. The nurse does an exam and determines what their needs might be, and if they need to see the doctor, then we can use this money to send them to the clinic. This past year, we saw a 50% reduction in this service due to the free clinic of Pierce and St. Croix counties. So people are utilizing that service, which has been very helpful. These are the people that you saw up here earlier today. This is Lori Diaby and Ed Thurman, and these are the programs that they work in. And this is Chapter 254 of the state statutes is our environmental health program. In addition to the inspections and licensing, there's the childhood lead poisoning, the transient non-community well inspections and licensing, environmental health services, and recreation sanitation. We screened 121 children through the WIC and Well Child screening programs for lead this past year, and the private clinics screened 748. Through both of these collaborations with the private providers and our own screening, we identified 5 children with an elevated lead, and through that then we will make a home visit, look at if there might be lead hazards in the home or what might be happening with these children who have an elevated lead level. In addition to the 360 facilities that were inspected through our inspection and licensing, we also had a contract to inspect 19 mobile home communities this past year. This is Geraldine Carl, our tobacco control specialist, and through Chapter 255 is put in the chronic disease and injuries piece of state statute. Tobacco control works with prevention, cessation services, and protection from secondhand smoke. Geraldine is actively involved in the Pierce St. Croix Tobacco Free Coalition, and they do work throughout the county and work on both indoor and outdoor tobacco-free policies. And through the work of this past year, one major manufacturing company implemented a tobacco-free policy on their grounds this year. In addition to the chronic disease and injuries is our Well Woman program, which serves 64 women, 11 women having abnormal results and were referred for case management and referral and follow-up. One woman was diagnosed with breast cancer and was provided treatment through the Well Woman Medicaid program. We also have a bike safety helmet program where we go out, we purchase the helmets, and we sell them for our cost and go out to health fairs if we're invited in the community. And last year we participated at Nielsen's Super Value at their bike and health safety fair in the community and sold helmets to the children there. And then we have several coalitions. We have seven active coalitions and collaborations that we participate in the county. And this is our group of our staff. And so we work in community partnerships, collaboration, and doing individual visits. Are there any questions?
I noticed on your slide, Badger Care Plus, is that a new insurance program that's in the making now, or is it in effect? I know Badger Care, but not Badger Care Plus.
Badger Care Plus, we had a grant to enroll, try and get people enrolled in the program, and then Badger Care Core is coming out this year. They're implementing that. It's the Medicaid program for people who have a little higher income levels than Medicaid, and Badger Care Core is coming out and will be able to enroll single adults. So it'll cover, it's expanding that. But Badger Care Plus was an expansion of the Badger Care program.
When I was on the Health and Human Services Board, I believe I remember that dental health checkups were not covered under Medicaid. That would have been several years ago. According to the information you were just providing, I gather that now they are?
They're covered, however, the provider, finding a provider that will provide those services is the problem. So, some dental providers, private dental providers won't take Medicaid, or they'll only take X number. They might take some, they might have in there, they decide that they're only going to serve 10 Medicaid people with Medicaid, and so they max out at that. So it is available, and we're doing varnish, which is painting dental varnish on the teeth in various applications throughout the year. Does that answer your question, Bill? Okay.
Thank you, Wendy.
Okay.
We'll move on to number.
Good afternoon. This is the Health and Human Services Board report regarding private pay rates at the nursing home. And just as a quick note on rate setting, we talked a little bit about that earlier today with regard to public health. We bring those rates to Health and Human Service Board for review and approval, typically on an annual basis. That is what we've been talking a little bit about with regard to private pay. There. If I recollect, the specific referral question was as follows: when will the private pay rate at the nursing home be raised $58 per day to break even cost? So in essence, currently the private pay residents are subsidized a total of $58 a day. Some of the discussion points then to lead to a final decision by Health and Human Services. We took a look back. I became Director of Health and Human Services in April of 2005. So I looked prior to that time frame, and we looked at our profit loss by payer, and this is Medicare adjusted. And basically what that means is Medicare consumers that come into our facility require more direct care based on rehabilitation likely. So we adjusted more of the expenses towards Medicare patients. And in 2004, you can see what the actual loss was by each of those pay sources. Up to 2007, you can see the adjustments as well, where we actually made some money on Medicare, but private pay has gained ground in terms of loss as well as Medicaid. The $58 a day is based on the projected 2009 budget, so that's where that dollar figure came from. Again, this is profit loss just by payer mix. Part of what I guess I would like the county board to take from this is that the business plan for the health center hasn't necessarily adjusted since 2004. We've taken private pay, Medicaid, and Medicare consumers. Part of what the Health and Human Services Committee looked at was also population trends around needing to have beds, or at least from the discussion, felt the need to have beds within the community at the level of 72. If you look out to 2035, Croix County will have a population of about 145,000 individuals. You can see where we're at in terms of 2009, which equals about 80%. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to talk to Pete about the left-hand column with percent change, but he gave me the latest and greatest that he had. But that shows the population trends for our county are going to continue to grow. In addition, one of the discussion points for the committee was the populations of those individuals that are 65 and above. If my recollection serves me correctly, in 2005, the percent of the population was about 10.5%, and in 2035, it'll be 18.2%. So there'll be more seniors in St. Croix County in the year, with projections in the year 2035, almost doubling the number of seniors over the age of 65. One of the, oh, there you go. You could see the 18 and 10%. This is my first run through this, actually, so. That last slide was also provided by Pete Klingstrom Extension. We were asked to take a look at what do we have for resident days, what's the breakdown, and you can see the number of days totaling 23,177. You can see by pay source the number of days that we had in each category. And the question was asked, well, what's the actual subsidy? We took the 2007 numbers and calculated at $55 per day would be about $295,000. The Medicaid subsidy is about $1.1 million, based on the $70 a day loss. When we had this discussion, we talked at length about possible outcomes. We talked at length about those outcomes prior to the committee meeting with Dennis Ryman. Dennis is our current contract administrator. And we also consulted with Larry Lester, who I think many of you are familiar with. Larry works for Wifley. We took a look. If we raised our private pay rate, it's currently competitive with surrounding providers. I don't have that detailed information, but it's somewhere in the middle of what private pay rates are for other facilities within the county. If we were to raise our rates $55 a day, that would put us out of the cost market for being competitive, and would most likely lose 3/4 to all of our private pay residents. That was how we calculated the analysis in terms of finances that you'll see in just a minute. Whoops. We also took a look at our Medicare admissions, and you could, if you recall, in 2007 we made a little bit of money each day on Medicare, but some of the Medicare folks that come to our facility actually go to private pay after their Medicare benefits are exhausted. So it's likely we would probably lose another 50% of those individuals that would choose another facility where private pay rates are more competitive. Again, discuss that at Health and Human Services. Finally, and this gets a little wordy, but given that at this point in time, at any point, we do open beds basically on an emergency basis if we needed to relocate residents, there's about 60 beds that are available at any given point in time in the county. This month, I think it was 56, the case in time. Pretty consistent, and with that many open beds, it's extremely unlikely that we would replace our private pay residents or Medicare residents with Medicaid residents. In other words, all of the other facilities that are taking Medicaid folks, they would have other alternatives that they would likely continue. We're currently not, as a matter of practice, turning individuals away. So if we average currently about 65, look at the reduction in private pay, look at the reduction in Medicare residents, we would project that we would be running occupancy about 48 to 52 residents. So what we did, and I apologize if this is hard to see, but we took, because we have talked about nursing home, we've talked about 50-bed analysis over time, and you can see in the first column, this was one that I think has been presented to this board previously. But we took our three basic operating revenues, you can see Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay, continuing as we currently operate with a competitive private pay mix of consumers, or excuse me, private pay in terms of our competitors in the area. At the very bottom of the page, you'll see county allocation and nursing home carryover. If you take that $474,000 and the $191,000, you come up with about $665,000 that it would require of local subsidy, local county appropriations to continue if we were reduced to 50 beds and we continue to operate accepting private pay residents at a rate that's competitive. If you look at the second column, you'll note that we reduced the Medicare residents by about 50%. We increased the Medicaid population based on the fact that we would have more Medicaid consumers. And we went ahead and completely eliminated the private pay revenue source. Go all the way down to the bottom and you'll see that the operating expenses for county appropriations actually goes up from 700 to about 705,000 plus the 191, which is carryover dollars, equaling about $896,000. So a loss or an increase in county appropriations of about $231,000. We kept most of the other costs consistent, except you can see that we actually reduced daily patient expenses. And we did that because we would have less Medicare consumers that have higher level of needs for rehabilitation. So those were some of the pieces of information that we looked at. What's been the history of the facility in terms of payer mix? What are the rates within the community in terms of private pay? What would be the potential impact if we raised our rates to a break-even cost at $58 a day? We did an analysis of that based on 50 beds because, again, we don't think that we would replace a lot of our residents to keep a 72-bed facility presumably viable. And with that information, on February 18th, you can read the action that Health and Human Services took and asked that I would report to this county board. The only other thing that I would add at this point in time that's not on the presentation is that we are in the process of hiring a nursing home administrator. And one of the pieces of work that I think is important for the county to review, primarily Health and Human Services first and then presumably to the full county board, is what is our business plan from this point forward. As you saw in 2004, we were taking a mixture of residents. 2007, no different. Today, no different. But is there a different plan that we could come up with that may in fact impact the county appropriations in a more positive manner? Are there specialty markets that we could pursue? Is there some other planning that we could do to really take a look at where to go from here? And the committee, and please, committee members that are here, if you have more information to add, please add it. But I think the committee wanted to start there, take a look at what type of a plan we'd want to look at strategically and or business-wise, and bring back information after we hire a nursing home administrator. And with that, that's all the information I have to report.
Just a quick question, Fred. How do we compare to the other 7 or 8 nursing homes as far as private pay costs per day?
We're somewhere in the middle. So there are a few facilities that are higher than us and a few that are lower. But with the $5 a day add-on, we'll still be relatively close to the middle of the road.
What range then, to follow up on Mr. Osmus' question, what was the range from the one who was lowest to the one that was highest? So we can get some sense of what difference $5 a day makes versus what difference $10 a day might make.
I believe the lowest was, and Dennis is here, Dennis may be able to help me out with this. I looked in my packet and unfortunately I didn't bring that information with me today. But I believe the range was from about $170 a day to a little over $200 a day. Facilities varied in their private pay rate, also based on whether it was a private room or a shared room. And typically those add-ons above the 170 or the 200 range anywhere from $10 to $15 a day. We actually are right around, I believe, $185 a day. Does that sound right to you, Dennis?
183, I think.
183. Dennis, does that include our private room add-on?
No.
So that would be another, that's the daily rate, and then there would be an add-on on top of that.
Fred, I realize that the motion that's displayed here is for information and we're not discussing the motion itself, but the observation I have to the action item that was taken is that $5 a day is a flat number dealing with an expanding, a likely expanding or potentially contracting subsidy number. The $58 that is the difference may in fact be increased in the future based on additional costs or other factors. And it appears to me that a flat $5 a day on an annual basis into the future is likely not to cover an increase in operating costs and probably will not even cover the increase in personnel costs. So the attempt to reduce the subsidy of $58 a day may even continue to expand with an additional subsidy. We're not even keeping up with the difference in what that gap might be. It would have seemed to me, and I guess I would urge the HHS to consider moving against that subsidy with a different set of arrows in the quiver, maybe to reduce it on a percentage basis or to reduce the gap in some fashion so that we can get some traction on whatever that subsidy number is, as opposed to a flat number that only makes sense at a point in time.
The only thing that I could add to that that comes to my mind is typically when we've looked at rates agency-wide, which would include the nursing home, they typically have been a dollar amount increase, not necessarily a percentage amount, but that doesn't mean that couldn't change in the future. And I would reiterate that as a nursing home administrator comes on board, these would be items that we would need to take a look at in terms of how we want to conduct business at the health center in the future. I mean, one thing is for sure, the cares that we give is very good. We just completed our third annual survey that was site-free, and so we don't want to see that type of care delivery change necessarily, but some of the population mix, specialty units, those types of things that I mentioned earlier, may be a business plan that we would need to take a look at, presumably to see if there's ability to provide care for people that are having access issues, as well as look at what the bottom line on the county appropriations could be if we were able to develop a plan that looked more regionally, quite frankly, rather than just within the geographic boundary of St. Croix County. But those are things that we have ideas about, but we'll need to pursue further.
Yes, I'm really having a real hard time understanding the financial part of this because you're talking about these generalities of it costs this much for this one but not as much for this one. I have a statement from the state of Minnesota here on classifications of nursing homes and what their charges and their rates might be. And they use things like their minimum data set, which is how it's determined due to your medical condition and things like that. Along with what they do is they follow up with your ADLs and they give you a score. And that now comes out and says, okay, this is how much the cost is for what you can receive for that particular patient. So do we have something like that so that we can say, okay, we can go over here to CCH and say, okay, I have a person that has this score, what are your charges for it? Or is it just kind of randomly put out there? I don't understand how you acquire these numbers. And the second part is I do commend the staff out there that do a phenomenal job. I have a lot of contact with them.
Dennis, you're our content expert with regard to rates and how they're determined on the minimum data set and the activities of daily living. You're going to have to come up here and use a microphone. I guess I would prefer to have Dennis respond to your specific question of how that's determined.
If I understand your question correctly, the minimum data set is what is used to determine acuity, how much care a person needs. Wisconsin's payment system is different than Minnesota's. There is a Medicaid rate that we receive, and then there is Medicare rate and private pay rate, and the private pay rate is not regulated. In Minnesota, Minnesota regulates the private pay rate, and you can only charge what you can charge for the Medicaid rate. So it's the same whether it's private pay or Medicaid. Wisconsin, you can change that. But the MDS that you're talking about is what is used to determine the basic amount of service that a person needs, and that would be the same everywhere. Medicaid rates are governed by Wisconsin, by the state, so they do not, I mean, one nursing home doesn't say, we'll charge you this and we'll charge you that, but that's what you can do with private pay rates. That's why we're having this conversation today.
I guess just along with that though, so in other words, if I went into CCH right now with a client number and they gave me this type of a number, I could go in there and they could tell me what their rate would be, correct? So meaning that the private pay would be an equivalent, because I can't quite understand where you're coming up and saying that there is this difference without being able to show me numbers that tell me that there's a difference. It's just saying that there's a difference, but nobody has showed me that there's a difference.
A difference in what?
That private pay is paying $58 less than Medicare.
Well, we charge more for private pay, and I don't know exactly how they came to that number to start with, but there is a rate for private pay that is higher than Medicaid, and that offsets some of that cost, because if we didn't charge that, everybody would be at $70 a day.
So in other words, what you just said is that private pay is already paying more than what we get from Medicare and
Oh, yeah.
Medicaid. So then how can you say that they're paying $58 less when
what the accountants, I'm not an accountant, but the accountants take all the costs that we have and they spread them over all the resident days, and they come to a determination of how much it costs to take care of a person for a day. And then private pay pays a certain portion of that. Medicaid, or Medicare, I mean, pays more than that. And then Medicaid is the middle there, and that's what determines whether it's the Medicaid rate or the private pay rate. I didn't do that exactly clearly. I'm trying to think on my feet here. So they spread all the costs, and they figure out how much it costs for every single person for the number of days. And so you look at that cost, and you figure out that Medicare pays over that amount, and private pay pays more than Medicaid. So you figure out how much you're losing on some people and how much you're losing on private pay. Are you confused yet?
Well, one thing is working as a paramedic on the street, I know that a private pay pays quite well. If I go to Medicare and Medicaid, we get nothing, and that's why ambulances are failing. So I'm not quite sure how Medicare and Medicaid are paying more than a private pay person. I've just never seen it happen.
Well, Medicaid is paying less. Medicaid pays the least. Medicare in nursing home revenue is much higher than our regular rates.
This slide
because
here,
the acuity is much higher.
This slide again represents on a daily basis, taking all of our cost centers for 2004 to 2007, and you can see on a daily basis we made $9.60 on Medicare. We lost $70.13 a day on Medicaid, and we lost $55.72 on private pay in the year 2007. And you can look at the numbers for 2004 as well.
Just kind of a devil's advocate here. In all the arguments we've had over the years, on one hand, I hear that that we're providing a better service than probably the other private nursing home, most of them anyway, and I don't argue that point. One of our downsides was that our wages that we pay our employees there are higher, and so that makes us less competitive. But I guess my question is, if we are in fact providing better service, which I think we are, why then can't we raise this rate toward the higher end, the private rate, and try to recoup some of that?
There's nothing that would prohibit us from raising our private pay rate $10.15 to be the highest in the county. The Health and Human Service Board chose to take action to raise it $5 a day. We're going to be meeting with our nursing home administrator. The new person, be one of their major charges to start taking a look at what should we look like in the future. And I would just say that our last 3 surveys have been very good with regard to our resident cares. And I don't have access to other facilities in the county on a day-to-day basis, so I didn't want my comments to say we're better. We've just been very successful. Better than other homes. We've just been very successful the last 3 years, and we do have a good staff that provides good quality cares to our residents.
Thank you. By my quick calculations here, if our private pay rates were raised up to the $200 per day, which is what I heard you say, Fred, is the top of the county, of all the county nursing homes, around $200 a day?
It's around that dollar
Okay.
figure.
If we raised our rate $17 a day, and if one resident would pay that, we would pick up an additional $6,200 per year per private pay resident. Now, based on that, how many private pay residents do we have? 10, 15? How many?
Dennis, I think, what is it, we average anywhere from 13 to 15?
Yeah, it's around 14, 15.
Okay, so based on that, if we were to raise our rates to the top of the private pay rate in the county, matching the private pay at the highest rate in the county, we would pick up somewhere between $80,000 and $95,000 per year on the private pay patients to offset this $295,000 a year subsidy, which you reported from 2007. Is that not correct?
If the private pay mix didn't change because of that increased rate, your calculations seem correct.
The assumption here is that your private pay enrollment and population is going to be there when you get that $200 a day rate. We don't think there is. It's going to be there. Now, if you're really wanting to look at this nursing home financial picture, start focusing on the 72 beds that we have that we are not occupying. Fred is smiling now. And I could very easily replace the private pay with Medicare if I had a 50-bed unit and get a higher rate and maybe break even. I realize that's hard, but he's smiling now. Those are the bare facts of the numbers.
Well, excuse me, but when we have talked about a 50-bed unit, it seems to me that you, my esteemed colleague, have been absolutely dead set against a 50-bed unit. Now, are you today changing your mind?
I never changed my mind. I'm not against a 50-bed unit. And that just comes out of our reports. Now, your 50-bed unit can be achieved in a number of ways. We're licensed for 72 beds now. And Fred, are we safe in saying we occupy? We don't get 60 beds every month.
We currently are running a census of about 66 or 67 on a monthly basis. And I smiled. I saw somebody in the back of the room. I apologize. I should watch my mannerisms a little bit while I'm up here and while you're speaking.
So that ought to be addressed at some point. There's a lot of money going from 72 beds to something other than what we have.
Just a comment to Dennis or to Fred. Historically, private pay folks ran out of private funds typically about a 6-month average. I don't know if that's changed, Dennis, but not many people have that kind of money to absorb that daily per diem endlessly, and so it's not like you can project that if we raise it, it's going to be 6 months consistently. It's difficult to anticipate that.
I don't know what the average is really anywhere. Is people to go through their own money, but if you raise the rates significantly, they're going to go through it faster, which means then they will be going on the Medicaid rolls sooner. So it's probably going to be a wash is probably what it's going to be. And if I may, just a little bit about raising it up to the top level. The people that are there paying the current rate, if there's a sudden jump of $17 a day, they'll probably pay it, but they're going to be vocal, I would guess. What I would urge or suggest more than that would be that instead of raising it only once in a while, to take a look at this seriously at raising your private pay rates on a more consistent basis to try to keep up with those around you and keeping an eye on the competition.
Is this the slide you're referring to?
We could use that to estimate the percentage. This is the payer mix kind of chart, isn't it?
Exactly. This is our resident days, our payer mix. Exactly.
Yeah, great. Wondering why you, in doing that 2-column analysis that showed the 50-bed facility, if I understood it, you made the assumption that the people who would not come to the county nursing home because the private pay rate was too high would be replaced by medical assistants or Medicaid patients. Is that correct? That table right there, is that the assumption?
That second column, you're correct.
Okay, so where would those people come from? They'd come from other nursing homes within some distance that they were willing to move into the New Richmond home. Is that correct?
Well, we currently have a number of our consumers, anywhere from 68 to 75% are Medicaid currently.
Right. And if you suddenly had 14 open beds, because there were 14 private pay, you raised the price, they all moved out, where would Medicaid patients come from to fill those beds to fit that chart, to make those numbers work? They'd come from other facilities in the county, most likely, wouldn't they?
Again, we didn't calculate a budget based on 72 beds because we didn't think they would come from any place else in the county.
In fact, you calculated on 50.
Correct, because the number of residents that we have that are private pay and Medicare we're assuming be reduced, because at any given point in time in the county, there's approximately 60 beds that are available for individuals to get their needs met in nursing home care. 60 extra beds, there's excess capacity right now. And that comes on a monthly report that we take a look at that addresses if we need to move individuals on an emergency basis, where could they go? And so we get that listing at a point in time every month.
Understood.
The patient mix days, which was the slide that you had up here just before this, is 2007 data. Is that roughly analogous to what the patient mix is in the home at this moment?
Yes.
Well, with all due respect to, is your name Dennis? Yes. I understand when you speak about private pay patients who might squeak or squeal if their rates were raised, but I have to tell you that when I'm looking at a $300,000 subsidy that we're asking our county taxpayers to pay, I think they might squeal too.
Yes, I guess one of my biggest things is I can make the assumption then that all private pay people no longer pay taxes.
Yes, when visiting with people and it comes up to the nursing home subsidy, and I mention it might cost you $20 or up to $20 per year, so that's not much. It might be far less than that. It might be $5. We don't know that ahead of time, and most people don't object at all.
This discussion just reinforces what I thought before I came in today, is that we badly need a business plan. And I certainly hope that in the very near future that we get to the creation of it. And that would be including, I would hope, a recognition of the quality of care that we do actually have currently at the nursing home, and the appreciation of it by the county residents, and the reinforcement of that by some advertising, which would increase demand, which presumably would, an appreciation of quality care, which would probably lead to more private pay patients, and perhaps more Medicare patients as well, depending upon how convenient it was for them. But it does seem to me that we need to have much more in the way of an appreciation of the ways to increase our revenues from at the nursing home and the various measures that might be taken. And so I applaud the Health and Human Services aim to do this, and I hope that they get to it as soon as possible.
I guess the question I have is thinking about this is, we're seeing that we're subsidizing private pay patients right now to the tune of, did I hear, $58 a day. Private pay comes in and we're subsidizing, and I heard the word to remain competitive. What I view this is as we are paying, as taxpayers, are paying $58 a day per patient of private pay to keep them from going to the private homes. What would happen if all of a sudden the private homes, and trying to keep their doors open, if all of a sudden they were to drop their rates a little bit more? Would we subsidize more to hold the patients we have? Or because as these patients are being denied the ability, I shouldn't say the ability, they're being enticed to come here at a $58 incentive to come here to the county home, we are denying the ability of the private homes of having more people come in so they can offer better services, and we just continue with this vicious cycle. I think we ought to be looking at raising these rates for private pay.
Fred, could you go back to the slide that has the graph of the demographics on it? Yes. No, the one with the graph. The The legend indicates St. Croix County in terms of population trends, and we've been reading it in the literature that comes from Bill Rubin's office. We've been reading it in the paper that these demographics, there's a consensus that the population is going to increase to the extent that the graphs indicate, and I would venture to say that a good percent of that increase is not so much due to new people coming into the county as it is to older people continuing to live because they have better care. We're talking about a $58 per day subsidy per resident who pays private pay. The last time I did some inquiry into this, I was told there were 55,000 tax parcels that pay into the levy. If you divide, yes, here we go again. If you divide the 55,000 tax parcels into the $58 a day subsidy per resident, that's 1/10 of 1 cent per day out of my pocket to help someone who needs my help. Of those to whom much has been given, much is expected, and I don't think this is asking too much.
We got one more question.
One last question. I know a lot of service or nursing homes are nonprofit, of which that means they don't pay any taxes. How much are county people subsidizing the nonprofit nursing homes in our county right now?
I mean, I don't have that information to know what they would be paying in taxes if they were a for-profit and what would be then lost revenue for the county. I don't have any information about that. Maybe others do, but I don't.
So maybe if we're looking at that we're subsidizing the $58, maybe we're already subsidizing more of that to private companies.
1/10 of 1 cent.
Again, I wouldn't know the answer to the question. The thing that I guess as we move forward here,
For your person, for your tax person.
and pardon? The thing I guess I would ask the county board to consider as we move forward is that this has been a topic that has been discussed, at least the nursing home and whether we should be in the business or not, for the better part of almost the last 4 years since I've been Health and Human Services Director. And I don't know what the shared vision that you might be able to come up with, what the facility should be doing in the future. I just know that during the time frame that we were looking at requests for proposals, looking at the possibility of selling, leasing, or partnering, we did not go back and change our business plan. We did not go back and look at that point in time to bring in a nursing home administrator because there was questions about the long-term nature of our, whether we're in the business or not. What the Health and Human Services Committee has addressed is the referendum question, indicated on really a 2-to-1 margin that the public thought we should be in the business. So we're now going to move forward with a nursing home administrator. We're going to take a look at our business plan. But I would encourage this committee, this county board, to look at what is the shared vision, what can this group come together on in terms of what we ought to look like. And I think another reasonable question, is there a target that would be acceptable around what is the amount of county appropriations going into the facility? What's a reasonable amount? And then we can come back as staff, work with the various either consultants or with our administrator and say we can either hit that target or we can't. It's been somewhat of a moving target. We did decrease the levy, I think significantly, roughly $500,000 over the last couple of years through operational efficiencies. But we're now seeing the appropriations go back up. So back to Jerry's consideration of 50 beds versus 72, looking at budgets, what are the assumptions, what types of market should we take a look at in terms of how we provide care, are all things that I can bring to you But again, it's going to take some sort of a shared vision on how we actually then get there. Otherwise, we'll keep talking about what's an acceptable amount of county appropriations that can go into the budget, because I don't know that we can ever get back to a break-even point given our reimbursement structure with Medicaid. So with that, that's the report on what Health and Human Services did in response to the question that was raised in December.
Thank you. Before we leave, in your package you have a proposed timeline for development of the budget. You might want to look at that because we're going to be actively involved in the budget coming up, and we're already talking about budget. The other thing that's in here is a invitation to the drug court. I believe it's April 8th at 9:15 in the morning. And to see the kind of job that Judge Flack does, I'd recommend that you attend one of those. You'd enjoy and you appreciate the job he is doing on kids that have, or youngsters that have got drug problems. The other thing Julie handed me, and I had forgotten to bring it along, but WCA has set up a Central District Regional Legislative meeting on April 15th from 6 to 8:30 at the Stout Ale House in Menominee. And I'm sure all of you got that. If you're, there's a dinner with it. You're gonna, I imagine we're gonna pay for dinner, but there's a dinner with it. If you're interested in going, and Julie commented, maybe some of you people that are going would like to pool rides. And I'd say just do it on your own, and we can pass that information back and forth in the upcoming meetings. I know that Chuck and I will be going down there that night, so. Okay? I'll get this back to you, Julie, so you don't lose it.
I was wondering if there might be a possibility for the county to provide a van for people who might want to go down there.
Excuse me, come again now?
I was wondering whether there might be a possibility for the county to provide a van for those who might wish to go to the WCA meeting in, was it Menominee, I think.
Well, I didn't think about it. I just figured I'd drive down. It's 40 miles. It isn't. We could carpool. Yes. Well, I didn't figure it was for me. But I think I don't think so. I think we should just, if we have the interest, we should go. Chuck, do you want to add to that?
I was going to address the IOUSA.
Oh, okay. Or do you want to do it at another meeting?
It's getting dated as time goes on. They don't have to watch it if they
Okay, why don't, okay, the other thing is number 12 was review of the Wisconsin Counties Association video regarding our national debt. It's about a 30-minute video if you're interested. I saw this at the WCA convention. I tell you, it makes you sit up and take notice because they've done their homework on the numbers, and it is very interesting if you want to sit and watch it.
I might add for the audience at home, because I'm not sure that this is going to be picked up by the cable, but what we're going to show is a YouTube video. It's a shortened version of the longer movie. It's just simply the letters IOUSA, and you can find it if you Google it and watch it yourself. But otherwise, aging has allowed me to bring in the popcorn for you if you want. They have a little donation cup over there, and if you give us a couple of seconds, we can get this thing going. Those who don't want to stay, no problem. We'll just show it whether we got a quorum or not.
Before you leave, though, we got announcements from Cindy.
I just have a couple rezoning hearings scheduled for Planning and Zoning Committee. Excuse me. Wilma Edward and David Schachner to rezone approximately 74 acres from ag to ag residential in the town of Somerset. Edward and David Schachner to rezone approximately 81 acres from ag to ag residential in the town of Somerset, and the Schachner Family Partnership to rezone approximately 351 acres from Ag Tag Residential in the town of Somerset. That's all I have.
Okay, and just before we adjourn, I want to thank all of you folks for your cards and your concerns and your prayers while I was ill. Thank you very much.
Welcome back. Welcome back.